Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto Was a Daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto Mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
He looked around and noticed that everyone was here now. The Keisuke Gaara and his brothers. The bosses of the Yuga's clan, Akamichi, Inuzukas, Aburame, Yamankos, Okage herself, along with all the rookies 9. And the team of Gaze, but Sasuke along with the senses, Ibiki, Anko, Genma. Their aim and her father, Tazuna, and some other assorted guests. A memory flashed in his head of the princess of the snow country and her family. He smiled at that and Sakura saw him, and for the first time on this trip, he was happy, and she asked what he did to you. Happy now, Naruto. Naruto looked at her and said, I can't wait to see Yuki again. You remember her well. Sakura burst out laughing and said, it's kind of hard to forget the snow country princess after what we had to do to save her. It was just before Sasuke left. With his smile fading a little, Naruto smiled and said, don't worry, you'll see him someday. Also, she really became a strong leader after that time, and her country has grown. Sakura looked at him and asked, how do you know that? Naruto looked at her and said, I visited a couple of times. While traveling with Erosanin. He asked her to be in his Paradise movie Icha Icha. Sakura looked at him as if he was crazy and asked, he didn't, did he? Naruto laughed and said no. Her response was that only her husband would see her naked. Sakura let out the breath she was in, holding back and said, it's okay that I'm waiting. Naruto started to climb the ramp, but he shouted loud enough for her to hear and said, no, you miss me. I've been married. When he finished climbing the ramp, followed by everyone else. When he reached the top, he was stopped by one of the crew members who leaned over and whispered in Naruto's ear. The crewman said, sorry for interrupting Naruto-sama, but the prince and princess have come to see you along with their security. They are in the king's suite near the captain's on your left, room 101. Naruto smiled and nodded, turned left, and walked to the front of the ship. Gaara was looking at Naruto, and she remembers the note she received last month from Naruto. Gaara, I hate to ask this to our friendship, but I need you to come to Konoha on the 15th of next month and ask. At any rate join the mission to meet the leader of Snow Country with all the clan bosses, as well as the 9 rookies. And the Gay and Anabiruga team as well. Tsunade doesn't know anything about this, but it was an S-class mission that I couldn't talk about before this date that the third cage made me do. For him. I promise that once we get on the boat and get far enough away to see on the way to Snow Country, I will explain everything. This will not only affect Konoha, but also Suna, and if it doesn't go as planned, we will find ourselves in the Fourth Great War. It's that serious, and I can't mention or even tell Tsunade that I know about this until then. Please, for our friendship and whatever else I have with you, do this for me. I will make a similar request to other certain parties involved, and the official Snow Country notice will have exactly who has to come. Don't act like you know what's going on until I say otherwise. Trust me, he's more important than Tezuki. Thank you. Naruto? Gaara looked at his brothers, to whom he had already shown the letter in Suna, nodded, and they also boarded the cruise ship like a ship. Sakura saw Naruto to feel and walk towards the front of the ship, and started to head towards there, to when the same man said, sorry miss. Only special cases are allowed in that section of the ship while we're still docked. She looked at him and then asked, why is Naruto allowed? Drawing the attention of everyone on the ramp. The man smiled and said, the leader of the private guards of the snowy countries asked Naruto-sama to go there. That got everyone's attention, because no one called Naruto, Naruto-sama. A white-eyed Circean girl smiled at that, knowing a little about what happened after what happened. Flashback scene. 9-year-old Hinata was standing outside Naruto's apartment to deliver the birthday present he had given her. A pair of glasses. She was getting ready to put him on the floor at her door, when she heard what sounded like a fight inside her apartment. Fearing the worst, he activated his bloodline, and was shocked by what he was seeing. Naruto was fighting a wooden target that was moving, and what was even more surprising was what he had on. He was wearing an Arnu uniform, except for the mask he was wearing on his belt while fighting. She was so surprised that she didn't notice the person walking behind her. The third cage said, "Let's go inside, Inata. By the expression on your face, I think you accidentally discovered something you shouldn't have. We'll talk about it, and I have a proposal for you." And Mata was scared for the first time, until she saw that the person behind her was the Okage, and while she was listening to him, she calmed down, and they entered Naruto's apartment and had a talk that would change his life forever. End of flashback. A man that the team's 7 members knew, while Tazuna was smiling to know what was happening, because she had agreed with the third party to help him in exchange for what he did. Flashback scene. The third one looked at Tazuna and said, "I agree to send protection and only charge you the C rank, which is the price you can pay. Although I know it's in a rank, I'll send one of my better ninjas with you on this mission to make sure things work along with a side mission. He will contact you later on down the road after the mission has been completed and tell you what needs to be done to pay for the mission." Key phrase, Kitsune Cage. Until then, act like you're scared and your country is too poor to pay. He will make sure that once the team discovers the true range, it will go ahead and be completed. End of the flashback. I couldn't believe what needed to be done for this, but I had requested such as. He had been asked along with the other thing which was more of his area of expertise. Acting as the leader of the wave country was only an advantage, but it was worth it. She grabbed her purse and walked up the ramp. I was no longer a happy man. First, he was asked to go to the Okage Tower with his 2 daughters and Neji, and then he was told that everyone had to prepare for a trip to meet the leader of the Snow Country for something that could lead to destruction. From the village of the leaves. He would first refuse until he was told that the other 7 great clans had also been given the message along with a list of others who were requested by name. He had never seen anything like it in all his years. He did not miss his notice that not only the hunt had made the request, but also the leaders of Ola, T, the traveling merchant, the leader of Snow Country, whoever this person is, the Waterfall Country had sent a message just like the Rainbow Country. What was happening was being backed by some of the richest villages in the world. Tsunade looked at her teammate, who seemed to be depressed for some reason. At first, he was surprised when he received all the application from these different countries along with a scroll written by his sensei, the third Okage, who told whoever Okage was to do whatever was asked by the parties who came to the current Okage. At first, she didn't know what they had in common, but thanks to her assistant Sakura, she had learned that they had one thing in common. Even the ninja group that had been requested. Ibiki, Anko, Shizune, Iruka, Rookie 9 and the gay team with their senses, Konohamaru's body. All the clans of Kona, and the only other main member of one of them. The cook of the only ramen is standing in Konoha together with his daughter Iem. Midaston, the owner of the Wolf Claw gun store. Her and Yaraya. The only common thread was Naruto. Somehow he was involved, she knew it, and the way Yaraya was acting, she knew everything, at least some of what was happening. But since he told her that the leader of Snow Country had sworn him to secrecy until the right time, he couldn't because the repercussions were severe. She hated being left out of the circle. When Sakura started doing a scene about Naruto, she confirmed that she had something to do with this. After everyone got on board, the whistle blew, and the ship left the docks on the day trip by sea to Snow Country. Tsunade, after they were in the sea for about an hour, called a meeting with everyone involved. And 15 minutes later, he looked at everyone and said, "That's everyone." Everyone looked around, and Kakashi said, "It seems that Naruto is not here." Tsunade sighed and rubbed her temples and said, "I better not pick up your habits, Kakashi. Sakura, can you go get him quickly?" Sakura nodded and left the room, and was heading towards the front of the ship, when someone who looked like him and Abnua landed in front of her and said, "Can I help him, Miss Sakura?" Sakura was surprised and asked, "How do you know my name?" The man said, "All the security of the escort received information about the people who would come on this trip." Sakura nodded, knowing similar situations like this before, but not on such a large scale, and he said, "I was looking for my teammate Naruto." Another figure landed next to the first one, and he was dressed like the first one, except he took off his mask. And surprised Sakura by who he was, and said, "Sorry Sakura, the Dobe is busy visiting the prince and princess of the snow country at the moment, and they are not to be disturbed." Sakura stood like a fish out of water, and finally asked Sasuke-kun, "Is that you?" Sasuke smiled and said, "Yes, I was asked to help with security along with Itachi here," pointing to the man standing next to him. Sakura pointed her finger at the taller of the two and said, "Itachi, as in the Itachi you left us to kill. The same Itachi that worked for Tazuki, the same Itachi that was after Naruto." Itachi took off his mask and said, "Yes, but there is much more that you are not aware of. At the end of this journey, all questions will be answered. Come on, brother. We need to consult with Akizabuza. I will inform them and Naruto-sama about your need to see him." Sasuke nodded his head, and both on the left are swirls of leaves, and Sakura stood there for a few minutes while her brain tried reset before turning around and walking back to the group's location. When Sakura entered the room, everyone realized that something was wrong, and Tsunade asked, "What's wrong, Sakura, and where is Naruto?" Sakura looked at her for a few moments, and finally got out of there and sat down and said, "I think I just lost my mind." Tsunade looked at her cautiously and did not say what the new forehead is. Sakura still looked at him and said, "I went to look for Naruto when someone who looked like an Arnu appeared and called me by my name." Sasuke appeared next to him, dressed almost the same, and said that Naruto was with the prince and princess from Snow Country, and then acted like a friend with the guy next to him who took off his mask and called Itachi. And they seemed to get along well, even though I checked Itachi's body and saw that he was dead. Then they left and said they had to meet Akizabuza, who died on our Hello mission. A giggle was heard and everyone turned and saw that it was coming from Tazuna. And he said, "No, they are alive, and they are members of the elementary village security force. Directly under the elementary Shotoheim cages." Kakashi screamed, "But I killed Aku with a Kidori, and Zabuza died fighting those bandits, while he killed Gato. How can they be alive?" Gaara asked, "And how is Itachi alive? I saw his body myself." The door opened, and Aku walked in with Zabuza, and she said, "They asked me to make sure everyone is okay. We still have a long journey ahead of us, and we want everyone to be as comfortable as possible. Naruto-sama will be here shortly as soon as he can get away from the prince and princess." Kakashi looked at her with big eyes and asked, "How are you alive?" "I killed you." Zabuza chuckled and said, "Those were blood clones. The Rokad Amiokai had to make us disappear to be able to you. Working without the hunters following us to get ready to help the Leaf Village with what is happening." Tsunade looked at them and said, "There is no Rokad Amiokai. I am the Gadai Miokai, and the only person I have considered possible. Rokadai Miokai is Naruto, but he's not ready." "Who is this person?" Aku said, "I'm sorry, but Watermelon appointed this person to me with the permission of the two heads of the council in secret, and has been waiting and preparing for what is to come. You were only allowed to give your existence only if you refused to become Gadai Miokai, or right now if the mission's failed. I can't say anything more because he'll have to tell you the rest." The Sandaime had to be careful with the situation in question, or it would have meant the death of everyone in the village of Hoyas, or the enslavement of everyone. It was already asked, but how is that possible? Naruto came into the room and said, "Tell me already. Could the Leaf at any time in the last 30 years withstand the combined might of 16 villages at the same time?" As she walked to the front of the room and leaned against the wall, surprising everyone by what she was wearing. He was no longer wearing his black and orange suit, but a black suit. Normal black ninja hounen, with a white cape with orange flames on the background and leaves, but also had the box for Rokad, a Miokai. Tsunade looked at Naruto and asked him what the hell is going on. "The only thing all this has in common is that you start explaining, and what is the outfit you have?" Naruto sighed and said, "Zabuza, Aku, join Itachi Sasuke to patrol the ship for unwanted guests, and also stay tuned. I don't trust that warhorse any more than I can throw him. He screwed up the village many times, and by now the elders have informed him as I told them." They both nodded and said together, "Yes, Naruto-sama." "How did they leave?" Naruto waited until Tsunade broke the silence and said, "Start talking, Naruto. What are the Rokad aim things are talking about, and what's going on?" Naruto pointed to the empty seat with the others and said, "Take a seat." This will take a long time, and that question I asked you was no longer a simple question. That is exactly what we are facing. As he walked to the front of the room and sat on the floor in the lotus position, Tsunade said, "I won't move until I know what's going on." Naruto bent down and pulled up his right trouser leg and put his hand on a ram sign and said Kier. And a distortion was seen, and a tattoo appeared that only Tsunade knew what it meant. She looked at him and asked him, "How do you have the secret Naruto Okage tattoo?" Only someone approved by the heads of the council and the Okage could have that. Naruto made a gesture towards the chair, and she sat stunned and already looked at him and said, "It is impossible for one country to face the power of 16 countries at the same time, and it is also impossible for them to unite to do it, for their different points of view and opinions." Naruto said, "I wish it was like that, and it does, but because of the certain events, it's really possible. It all started before most of the people in this room were born. Can anyone in this room tell me how exactly the Second Great Ninja War ended? Jiraiya, you might want to stay close to Tsunade. When he reveals some things about the past, he might try to commit suicide or perform Orochimaru forbidden jutsu to bring the watermelon back to life so he can kill him." Jiraiya already nodded and sat down next to him and was looking at Naruto waiting. Shikamaru said the Second Great War ended when all the great countries decided that there could be no victor, as they were all bankrupt. And the loss of human power was too much to have. They had a peace agreement that was known only to the people who attended what was decided. Why is that? Naruto shook his head and took out a scroll from his jacket before opening it and said, "Exactly right. The agreement was a sign of neutral hostilities. However, what is not mentioned in the history books is that the 11 minor countries had wanted to attack the big 5 nations after that because most of the fighting they took place on their lands. The 5 big nations begged them because it would have sent every nation's economy into debt and another endless war. A neutral party of the 5 great landlords had decided to step in and fix the problem before it got worse." Hinoichi said that it has to do with an event that happened almost 70 years ago with what is happening now, Naruto. I don't get it. Naruto looked at the scroll and said, "I have the treaty that was signed. The neutral party had reached an agreement with all the smaller nations to pay the preparations for all the damage that was done in exchange. That the big 5 countries would pay a tribute for 50 years so that the party neutral pay them for helping to solve the problem. However, they covered themselves and made each of the parties involved, the big 5 nations and the smaller nations, that in case any country did not pay the debt in full the other countries had, then to help the neutral party to claim ownership over the village that was in default and everything inside, including clans, bloodlines, buildings, money, ninjas and techniques and villagers as property. In other words, it would be 16 countries more than one." Hinoichi said, "But surely we pay this so that we don't have to be forced into slavery by this agreement." Naruto said, "We were fine until the last 10 years of the original contract, when a certain member of the village, De La Hoya, decided that he wanted his own private army during the Third Great War and intercepted the payments as war booty. He took the money and rot formed. The Sandaime never found out because of the war until it was too late after the war ended, when the neutral party asked for the full amount. The debtor at the time, because they did not want to force the deal. Since the economy was paralyzed by the war, we could not afford it, so Watermelon came up with a plan for me that bought us some time, which unfortunately was interfered with Aegean, but by someone else, so he had to use another plan, and he did it by training me to get the money. Money for the people and also fail-safe in case an external interference happens again." He looked bored while everyone seemed surprised. Sakura said, "But you are the idiot of Naruto. How could I train you and do what you say? He hasn't done anything since then." Kakashi said, "The watermelon trained you for me, but since I was your teacher, just like Jiraiya, how could I have trained you?" Naruto took off his jacket and had a black sleeveless shirt underneath. He put his hands on a ram seal and said Kier. And a distortion appeared on his left arm and appeared a tattoo that most adults recognized, and Naruto said, "I was in Abnu for 4 years before I turned 10, Kakashi. I had to show the people that I was an idiot so they wouldn't look at me closely because of their hatred. I was trained to do missions alone, and I was also under Itachi before you saw me kill part of the Uchiha clan. Making several people gasp. And he didn't ask why you killed the Uchiha clan, Naruto. A voice from the back of the room said, because after finding out what was happening by Danzo, they started betraying the Leaf Village by giving information. It was the Uchiha clan council who gave them information on how to do it. They kidnapped Hinata, as well as information about when the precious ninjas were on missions to be killed or kidnapped. The night we killed them, we originally went to capture the Uchiha council. But they resisted, and my father sided with us. It was those loyal to my father and the Hokage who were loyal to the council. At the end, only 10 Uchiha were left alive, and another lie was created to try to help the village. When everyone turned and saw Itachi standing there, Gaara looked at him, and his sand started shooting towards Itachi, only to be stopped by a group of vines and roses appearing. And stopping them, making everyone look and see a couple of blonde-haired children under 4, and they had blue eyes, and the girl said, "Don't hurt Uncle Itachi." "Dad, Mr. Sandman won't hurt him, will he?" Naruto smiled and said, "No, Yuna, Uncle Gaara is not going to hurt the guy who was giving us secret information about Atetsuki. He was just playing, happy to see his friend Aegean. Now, what are they doing here right now? Dad thought you were asleep." Making everyone sweat at the thought of Gaara playing and calling Itachi his friend. If it wasn't for the fact that the little kids were in the room, all hell would have broken loose. The boy came up and looked at the sand. He was poking it. He looked at Gaara and said, "Can you make a sand castle, Uncle Gaara?" Making everyone sweat even more. Yuna smiled and walked over to Naruto, climbed on his lap and said, "We woke up when Uncle Itachi came and checked on us. So we wanted to see you, Dad." Naruto smiled, and Tsunade finally asked Naruto, "Who are these kids, and how do they use my grandfather's wooden skills?" Naruto reached into his coat and pulled out a seed and made it grow like a red rose, and Yuna said, "I want you to go and give this to the beautiful lady. Her name is Tsunade, and she is your great-grandmother. I told you and your brother." Yuna smiled and got up and came over and said, "Hello, Granny." Tsunade smiled at the girl, took the rose and said, "What do you mean I'm her grandmother, and you haven't answered my questions yet?" Naruto sighed and said, "I know, and the answer is one of the reasons I never call you by your name or title. That's one of the lies Watermelon told me to try to keep things a secret. You may not want to remember it, but you had a child once. The Sandai told me that you had lost him because of the attack, but that was a lie. You had a baby who was my father. He did it not only to protect you and him from your enemies, since I had started picking them up at that time, but also to ensure that our family line did not end by accident. I knew it from the first day we met in that bar. I wanted to tell him, but like Hokage I was not allowed, because the needs of the people were more important at that time." Tsunade had some tears in the corner of her eye as she remembered those events, and hugged the girl a little more and told her who he was. "Naruto, who your father was." Harieya said in a sad voice, "It was Arashi Kazama, the Yondaime. Watermelon lived up to its name for me as a teacher, teasing everyone for as long as possible. I didn't learn about it until the kids here used one of their bloodlines when Naruto made me take a trip here. During our 3-year training trip, he had gotten away with cheating on me the whole time we were here until we were leaving, and Yuna called Dad to Naruto. And made a flower like Naruto did. Just a moment ago, Arashi came running and said, 'Hi Dad, look what Uncle Sasuke showed me.' And he made a few hand seals that made Kakashi's eyes open, and rays started to form on the tips of Arashi's hand. Naruto smiled and said, 'I am proud of you, son, but what have I told you about using jutsu when you are not in training areas? Or in fights? Did you learn it well or did you copy it?' Arashi rubbed the back of his head and said, 'I forgot Dad, and copied him. It's boring to learn it any other way.' Naruto shook his head and said, 'Until you learn how to use. Well, I don't want you to use it again, or I won't show you the Rasengan when you're older, and I don't care if you can copy it. If you don't know how to do it, use it well, and what else it can do can be used against you.' Sakura finally had enough, and jumped to her feet, and shouted, 'Rasengan Naruto, he's just a kid, and he doesn't have a fox in him to help heal him. And I know what that other jutsu was too, Kidori. What the hell kind of father are you, and when the hell did you become a father, and who is his mother? Yuna laughed, and said Uncle Sasuke is right. You're a pink-haired sorry soul. That did it. Or almost everyone started laughing at Sakura for that, and she had a contraction. Naruto coughed with a fake cough, and said, yes now, Yuna. Daddy still has a lot of things he needs to talk about with his friends, so go play with Uncle Itachi. And ask Aunt Aku to show you how to fix the booze. Both boys raised their fist in the air and ran out shouting, yes, more jutsu. When they left, Naruto returned to the room, and everyone had an explanatory look on his face. When Team 7 came here to help Yuki claim her uncle, she had already told me what to expect on this mission. As she had a side mission to make sure her uncle would never cause problems, to get an ally and a possible financial aid. It was one of the last missions Sandai had for me before he died. During that mission, Yuki and I bonded, and after the mission ended and I was in the hospital, she confessed how she felt about me, and I also developed feelings for her. Kakashi said, but you were completely covered in wounds after that, and I left Sasuke with you to keep an eye on you. While Akura and I went back to notify the Okage of the mission. Naruto nodded and said, why do you think he was my best man at my wedding that week? And as for my wounds, I had the fox heal them quickly for me. Anyway, I told her about the real me, and about the truth of Kirubis, and my family's attack, and she did not hold it against me. And even supported him. I also told him what was really happening. When I left to come back, I didn't know it, but I was pregnant with the twins that everyone saw earlier. He found out that he sent me a message, and I gave him my bloodline summoning contract so that we could keep in touch. And, fortunately for me, the summoning plan. Infiltration for the Sound Village had worked, and I was given access outside the village to turn around and prepare for these things. Tsunade finally got out of her mess of emotions enough to ask what lighting sound. Naruto said, Sasuke's defection was a trap so that we could remember Orochimaru's snake contract and also have a spy in his village. For those who went on the mission, you will remember that I almost set off several alarms when we were fighting Sound 5. It was a way to slow us down long enough for Sasuke to successfully make it sound. I had my contact at Abnu who knew who I was to make sure there was an opening available for him to leave. They also watched in the background when Sakura tried to stop Sasuke, but she had no other choice. We both had our orders from the Sandaime that we had to fulfill. They were also less than a mile away from of each of our fights, ready to step in if things got worse. I underestimated you all that mission of how far you would get, or I would have never allowed him to progress as much as he did. And for those injuries I'm sorry. Anyway, since he possessed a bloodline contract like I do now, he was able to of transmitting messages as Hitachi was doing to inform me, and when the Sandaime was alive what was happening. Shikamaru asked Naruto, what exactly is a blood contract that you were talking about? I've never heard of them before. Naruto smiled and said, I'm not surprised. Most people who have them don't know how to use them or even of their existence. The blood contracts are the original summoning contracts that were kept within the family lines, but after so many summoning animals, they reached many summoners or none started making the contracts that they use now. Bloodline contracts don't have to be signed, but you must have the family markers in your blood for it to work. The watermelon knew me about the clans that had them, and I knew what animals they had. They were like a hidden trump card for us. The Uchiha family has the cats. And Nata, would you be so kind? And Nata smiled and said, I would love Naruto-sama. He made hand signals after biting his thumb and banging his hands on the ground, and a hawk appeared. Already asked Hinata, how did you find out about that? Naruto said, she learned it when she was 9 years old, after finding out she was in Abnu. The Sandaime knew that he would need information when he left the village, so he told him which animal it was. And the rest is a basic invocation. If you know which animal your bloodline contract was with you, just think about it while summoning. Hinata was given the mission to spy on me and inform me about important matters. Don't be mad at her yays, she was just following the Okage's orders. Tsunade then asked, "Which one does our family have?" Naruto closed his eyes and said, "Originally we didn't have one, but we know from Kyuubi. That reminds me that since I'm cleaning, I have some hunches about something. If everyone wouldn't mind performing the hand seals to summon and think of a fox in your head while doing it." Looking at everyone, Tsunade asked, "Why do you want us to do that, Naruto?" Naruto thought for a moment and said, "According to Kyuubi, the fox contract will only work up to 5 generations of me, which means that your grandfather and your brother, your parents, you and who was once Dad's father, along with 2 generations of him, Dad himself, and who be my mother, along with 3 generations of her, my children and I, with the only exception of being my wife, since I got the fox's permission. The chances are that Mom and my grandfather are dead, but you never know, and I would like to know if I have another family left." Jiraiya asked, "So, do you want to know who your grandfather are? And your mother, Naruto said yes. "The only thing I learned about the third one over the years under him is that he could lie through his teeth, and you'd never know. So I was thinking that if he did something like he did with Grandma here, I wonder what else he did." Everyone did, and Tsunade, Shizune, and Jiraiya, they made a little fox appear in front of them, raising some eyebrows. Tsunade said, "Oh, how the hell did that happen?" Shizune could be because of her Uncle Dan, who was the only man I slept with. However, Jiraiya innocently rubbed the back of his head, which raised a lot of eyebrows. As it was what Naruto did when he didn't want to say something. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and Jiraiya said, "I can explain, Tsunade." She said, "I'm listening." Jiraiya said, "I was drinking with the watermelon one night, and I approached Dan to tease him, and you walked into the bar. Drunk, and you thought it was Donnie. We went to the ally, and you can guess the rest." Tsunade was angry, but stopped any kind of attack when Shizune asked, "So, how am I related to Naruto?" "I had sex with only one person, but it was not now, yes. His name was Miso, and he looked nothing like Yodaheim. In fact, he was a Chunin, and I are only children, and my uncle apparently had no children, if Jiraiya is already Arashi's father." Kakashi said, "Oh," making everyone look at him. Shizune said Kakashi made a hand signal, and went up in a cloud of smoke. And he transformed into a man with brown hair and brown eyes, and he was the same height as Jiraiya and Shizune. He pointed his finger at Kakashi while he was changing. Kakashi sighed and said, "Well, you had relations with Aras and Sensei then. She wore that costume when she went out on dates because she didn't want to be with someone because that was the yondaime or his money." Shizune said, "But even if that was real, I never had a child. I lost the ability to have children the year due to a rare virus I caught that year that attacked the Kyuubi." Tsunade narrowed her eyes and said, "Naruto, what did Sensei say about your mother?" Naruto thought for a moment and said, "He said that she died giving birth to me. Why?" Tsunade thought for a moment and asked, "What did you mean earlier when you asked if they copied that jutsu or learned it well?" Naruto closed his eyes and opened them a moment later, and he opened them with a surprised look from everyone, while a diamond was around his eyes. Shizune seemed to have seen a ghost. When Naruto said the watermelon, he told me his name was Digen. He said I was the last one who could use it. It allows me to copy any hand jutsu like the Sharingan, but I can't see a few seconds into the future or paternal chakra. Copy genjutsu or taijutsu. I only use it against enemies who use a lot of jutsu that I've never seen before. If it's something I know, then I don't even bother." Then he closed them and opened his regular eyes for everyone. Tsunade looked down and said, "Hinoichi, I can ask you a favor." Hinoichi said, "Sure, Gadaime-sama." Tsunade said, "Can you go and look at Shizune's memories in the times close to Kyuubi's attack and tell me what you find?" Hinoichi looked at her and said, "Only if it's okay with Shizune." Shizune looked at Tsunade and asked, "What are you thinking, Tsunade-sama?" Tsunade said, "The fact that he has your uncle's lineage tells me that he is related to you, and as you said, you are an only child. The fact that you lost the ability to have children that year makes me suspicious. You were in Konoha at the time the Kyuubi attacked. I came and got you after the Kyuubi attack. Something that doesn't add up here." Shizune sighed and said, "Do it, Hinoichi." Hinoichi nodded and made a gesture with his hands, and it entered his mind, and a few moments later, it came out and fell on him. But he looked at Shizune and then at Naruto and said, "Shizune, can I ask you a personal question?" Shizune looked at him and said, "Go ahead." She looked at the floor and asked, Do you remember how you got that scar on your right breast? Tsunade said. He got it from Kirubi's attack. Why is that? And Noichi shook his head and said, she pulled it out of the clipper sword. She is Naruto's mom, but it seems that Naruto's real birthday is on the 9th, not the 10th, as everyone thought. And Shizune went into labor after jumping in front of an attack by Orochimaru. He was trying to hit the yondaime. The yondaime had someone put memory blocks on her so that she would forget everything about Arashi. And they made her forget everything from the moment she confirmed she was pregnant to the Cubis attack. It was probably one of my clan, but I couldn't tell you who, as we lost a lot of members in the attack. Shizune looked at Naruto, and he smiled and then spoke. She nodded. The watermelon made it look to me like the fake people were living there in the logs with their original plan, but after the Kyuubi attacked. The official count of the destruction was taken from the fake logs, so not so many people. He died in the attack of Cubis as everyone believed. We can thank Orochimaru for the attack, but since he's dead, he's fine. Shino said, if Orochimaru hadn't bothered Kyuubi, the plan would have worked, and then we could have paid the debt. Naruto nodded and said, Watermelon and Kyuubi told me the truth when I was 4 years old after getting beaten up, and I met the favor. The watermelon took time and tested me, and the first thing he showed me were the blood clones so he could take my blood. While he was training me, and then I got into Abno, doing rank 2 missions that went into an account to take out interest, and were completely off the books and helped to pay the debt. After the Uchiha disaster, I had the other 8. Uchiha is hiding like hunting ninjas, but since there was no official list for all the quests, I asked them to do the strictly off-the-books thing and logged in to try to save the village. Percent of the debt. You've already asked yourself exactly how big of a debt we're looking at. Naruto said dollar card, making everyone gasp. You've already wondered why it is so much. Naruto said when we renegotiated after Kirubi Danzo killed the first negotiator for them, and they got offended. They reported a penalty. I was missing only $10,000 from the original fine, with all the missions we did in secret. However, with the penalty that was another story. I came up with a plan after reviewing the contract, and until my plans were finalized, I could not reveal anything, but I came up with a way to save people and citizens of con of slavery, as well as all our money and techniques, as well as bloodlines, and that's why no matter what it is, I won't be a leaf ninja anymore. Making everyone scream that Dustin asked why is that Naruto. Naruto smiled and said, after getting close to the original payment, before becoming a genin with the Rookie 9, I went to the lords and asked them for a tablet after. Explained to them the truth about the Danzo's treatment. They told me they could come to an agreement if I could find something they wanted. When I told my wife about the problem after 2 years of marriage, when Yaraya and I visited, she gave me permission as a husband to wear something the lords would want. Spring country itself. This caught everyone's attention, and Tsunade asked where is the spring country, and how does that help us? Naruto smiled, and Tazuna said since Team 7 saved Snow Country, they have officially changed their name to Spring Country, and have become one of the richest countries of the world due to the new influence of farmland and other natural resources, as they used to be under a blanket of snow and ice. But now it has the best farmland in the farmland to cultivate food and other products. Kakashi asked how exactly this works, Naruto. Are you giving them spring to save the village? Naruto said, no. There will be a tournament in the spring country, and Tazuna has built an arena there for us with his engineering skills that have forests, mountains, valleys, trees, rivers. It's a 10-mile battlefield. And each team gathers up to 25 people for the battle. That's where you guys come in. I wanted to tell you the whole truth, so you know what's at stake, and I asked you to join my team. Shikamaru asks who exactly the other teams are. Naruto said all the parties involved. They get a team, and the way it looks is that Iwa, Cloud, Rain, Mist, Danzo and I are forming teams. The other countries say they don't want to get involved, as 4 of the 5 major powers are involved. It will be a winner who takes all the battles so that you can defend the kills. I do not know what Danzo will do, but I know that he knows, and if he wins, I can defend all the parties involved. And he will become the leader of the people and make it as their root. Gaara asks why Suna wasn't out loud to involve Naruto. If that's all I can get, so be it. But I'm fighting to win because I won't let my wife throw her homeland to the Leaf Village. And I don't care if I have to kill everyone who gets in my way. I must tell you all the time that any of you decide to get involved, the Leaf people will go to whoever wins. And also the head of the clans. You will have to come and watch the battles from the observation decks to find out who will have the right over them. Even if they're not fighting. If my team wins, I am handing over everything except the Spring Country back to Tsunade as Gadai Myokai, including my office, which is under a genjutsu on my bed. Apartment, if you remove the toilet lid in my bathroom, you will find a chakra focal point to dispel that one. I will stay in the Spring Country with my wife and children. Kiva asked who that was, and Nada said, that was the real Naruto, that he had to hide because of our village for his whole life. When he got up and walked out the door, Anko said, I'm in. Gaki beat the crap out of Orochimaru so he can return the favor. And Vicky said, in case any of you are wondering if I was telling the truth about Rokad being my Okage. I was his contact at Abnu and one of my men. He also reviewed all the missions before arriving at Tsunade so that he could choose the ones that were too dangerous. For the normal blade ninja to do like assassinate Lidning Uyamo 2 years ago. If that mission had failed, or the person who had captured her would not be able to return to the blade as it was made by Uchiha. And everyone knows that Uchiha is not currently loyal to the blade. I'm following the Rokad aim for its last mission. While leaving the room with Anko, Shizune looked at Tsunade and said, I have some grandchildren and a son to meet. When he got up, and Yaraya started to get up when Tsunade grabbed him and said, we need to talk. And they both left in a swirl of leaves. Everyone who was left looked at each other and Anna asked, so, what are we going to do? Shikamaru sighed and said, why do blondes have to rule the world and be so troublesome? Getting hit by Hino and Hinoichi. Sakura was thinking for a moment and said, I wonder in which village Itachi and Sasuke are separated now with the other Yukiyas. Getting the attention of everyone in the room. Tazuna officially said none. Naruto has a village made for ninjas looking for a place to call home as. They do help to defend the Spring Country from any enemies it may have, so whatever happens will not happen in their country. The Yukiyas live there and are happy. I know it's still small with only about 40 ninjas so far, but they are not getting involved in this fight. Naruto told them that that was the problem with the leaves, and that he was finishing his duty with the leaf. Most of the ninjas who live there are Jennings who left their village after their first deaths. And couldn't handle the old one to do much more than play and be with their family. The others are ninjas like Naruto who want a place to be with their families, and that's how they got there. So far, the village calls itself the Village of All Elements, and will be managed by 5 cages. Gaara asked 5 cages, how will that work? Tazuna said, well, the way Naruto explained it to me is that the cages are divided into the 5 main elements. The water takes care of all the problems in the village with health and food. The fire is responsible for the defense of the village and training at the academy. Lining is responsible for energy and trade-related items, such as companies and shops. Wind takes care of all the mission outside the village, as well as the training after graduation, and Stone takes care of all the citizens' needs that are not related to the child and the maintenance. Help for all rank missions on the island, as well as protection of the leader of the Royal Council. You are already wondering what this real advice is. Tazuna said Princess Yuki decided that the people of the Spring Country needed a governing body, so that they would not fall under a dictator like her uncle was. People were happy but sad because they wanted their family to have some power. So they agreed to give the royal family. It has a power of 33% in the council, and 1 veto a month on an issue. And they remain the figure of the country. And Noichi then asked, how did he give Naruto the right to use the land of spring in our problem? When she asked to do this for Naruto, it was approved not only by the entire council, but also by all the citizens of Spring's country. He unified them to show him thanks for what he did for them. You are all idiots for never noticing. Even when he was acting like an idiot, he still showed his strength. Neiji's battle against him is proof of that. And he left the room, leaving an astonished group. Neji, after a moment of silence, said, "It's okay. When I had my partner, Naruto was already a Kage. He hit me with just a Bunsen, Kage Bunsen C chakra, which, even though it came from his friend, was no different of me using my bloodline. He could have hit me at any time, but then my pride wouldn't have learned. Shikamaru-san, I'm wondering if I can get a shogi game with your son or the real him. It might be interesting." As he was leaving the room with his dad by his side, Hino looked at his dad and told him, "What are you going to do, Dad?" And Noichi said, "I don't know." Shino said, "I'm following my Okage." And his dad nodded, and they both walked out the door. It was already said, maybe we should spend the night, since it's getting late. Ochoji only ate his fries when he and his father left the room. Kiva looked at his mother and asked, "Well, what are we going to do?" His mother looked at him and said, "A good dog never lights his pack, and I, for one, don't want that dancing donkey to take over the village." Anna said, "You heard her, runt," as she followed her mother out of the room, with her brother a few feet behind her. Karena, and asked, "So, what are we going to do?" Kakashi said, "Do you know what I'm going to do?" Dustin asked why I'm here. "It's not like I have guns to fix or do or anything." A voice behind them said, "You actually do," causing everyone to turn around, and Kakashi's eyes widened at the sight of the person standing there. Kakashi said, "Rin, it's you?" Rin smiled and said, "Hi Kakashi, it's been a while." Dustin said, "Sorry for ending this meeting, but what were you guys talking about?" Rin came over, took out a scroll, and bit his thumb before breaking the seal, and said, "I need it repaired for 3 friends." Showing 2 swords, Kakashi saw them and stammered, "But that's my father's sword, how did you get it?" Rin said, "Naruto-sama has been collecting the pieces secretly for you, and the other one was the Nirame Sakage's sword. He plans to use it during the upcoming fights. The last one is for Sakura there. It was his father's sword that broke during the Cubus attack. Now I live on the island with my friends." Sakura was surprised because she knew about the swords, but she never thought she would ever see them. Dustin looked at the pieces and whistled and said, "This is going to be fun." With a smile on his face, Tenten smacked his forehead and said, "You had to do that, you didn't do it." He asked her what's wrong. Tenten said the parents' favorite hobby is restoring historical weapons. He's a kid in a candy store. He told me then that we are here for Dad. That would be to see your uncle there to me. Making her and her dad turn to look at the man who came through the door and hugged her. His father smiled and said, "How have you been, Ruben? I haven't seen you in 15 years. Ruben said, "Well, I met Naruto 2 years ago, and he tried to kill me for stealing your recipes, but after I told him who I was, he calmed down and asked me if I'd like a job, and I've been working in the village spring since then. I was hoping that you and Ayami would come and join me and my wife. May the family be united." There he smiled at me and said, "We'll see, let's talk more in private." When he grabbed both men, knowing the last time they met, they had a hangover for a week, and they left the room. Gemma sighed and thought what was the matter now. When the meeting ended, it was 10 p.m. Shizune had gone to look for Naruto and his grandchildren, with a lifetime of questions popping up in his head. He was about to reach the private section of the boat, where Naruto and the kids were told that when a roar was heard so loud that it could be heard for miles. It caught the attention of everyone on board the ship, and suddenly all the lights on the ship that had been turned off for the sleeping passengers came on. The spotlights came on and they started to search to see how everyone went out to look for the disturbance. For the previous generation, that sound was one that brought back many painful memories. A shadow was seen approaching the ship when another roar was heard, and Tsunade and Jirai already appeared next to Shizune and asked her what's going on. Shizune looked towards the shadow that was becoming visible in the darkness as the spotlights turned towards her, and made the outline of a creature easier to see. After a few moments, everyone was attracted to that side of the ship, and a giant fox with 8 tails in blue could be seen. and a figure could be seen, standing over her, and the closer the figure got, he could be seen as Naruto. Itachi landed with Sasuke and asked, "What are you doing here, Naruto?" Getting everyone's attention. The figure jumped out of the fox's head and slid down with flowing grace and a white kimono, and landed gracefully on the deck of the ship while everyone was looking at the figure that looked like Naruto. But after further observation, it was sexy Naruto without a jutsu body. The Naruto woman said, "Itachi, get that idiot out of a brother of mine and get his ass out here." Yuki said, "It's time, and this time it's better that I'm not late." Itachi nodded and left in a swirl of leaves, and Sasuke said, "Who has the other Naruto?" The Naruto woman turned to Sasuke and said, "They are with Karen at the Uchiha complex." Naruto appeared next to Sasuke and said, "You took off his glasses, Naruto. And what the hell are you doing here? I told you not to stay away from Yuki until I get back." Naruto said, "Listen, you idiot. When I was rude, I took his glasses." Yuki said, "It was time for me to get your ass now. Why do you think I would summon Mirana to bring me here in the middle of the night?" Naruto turned pale and said, "But they're not supposed to be here for another week." Naruto said, "It's not my fault. Now get your ass in gear. I'll keep an eye on Yuna and Arashi." And the fox disappeared from the water in a cloud of smoke. Naruto looked around frantically and said, "Naruto, Tsunade knows, and also Shizune and Erosanen are related. So find out." As he jumped in the air and seemed to float when the wind gathered around him as he floated in the air over the sea. And then he started waving, and suddenly shouted, "Kuchio Sei no Jutsu summoning technique, Kyubi Kitsune." And suddenly a cloud of red smoke appeared, and there under Naruto is the nightmare of 16 years ago. The Kyubi in all its glory. Naruto said, "Kyubi, take Yuki to me quickly." Kyubi said, "Good kid, but remember not to call me Jian until the battles." And he ran out towards the way Naruto appeared. Everyone was wide-eyed, and Sakura came running and looked around and asked what was that and why is Naruto in his sexy form without jutsu. Everyone turned to look at her, and Naruto said, "It stinks of Sakura-san." "Ah, that was the Kyubi, and B, I'm not Naruto." Tsunade finally got over her surprise and asked, "If you're not Naruto, who are you?" Naruto turned to her and said, "Well, Bachin. I'm his twin sister Naruto." Everyone was gawping, and Kiba said, "Duin," and Sakura said, finishing her sister's sentence. And Vicky walked through the crowd and said, "It's good to see you, Jian Naruto. Since you recovered and left, I haven't had a chance to see you." Naruto turned around, and in a gentle and kind voice said, "It's good to see you too, Ibikizan. How have you been?" And Vicky said, "Well, how about you?" Naruto said, "I've been great, taking care of all my nieces and nephews." Talking about where the other two are. And he didn't say another two. I thought Naruto only had 2 kids, and how come he has a twin sister that we've never seen before? Naruto shuddered at that part, and looked at Ibikizan, and said, "Naruto, still. He hasn't told anyone about you. It's a sensitive issue because of you." She nodded and said, "Well, my idiot brother has little Arashi, who is the eldest, and his twin Yuna. It also has Tsunade, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, Kakashi, Rin, Obito, Sakura, Sasuke, and little Naruto Jr., who were also born at the same time." Kiba shouted, "What the hell? There are 9 children born at the same time. How the hell did that happen, and why did he name them that?" Several people started laughing among themselves. Rin, Itachi, Sasuke, and Naruto, who said the answer is really simple. He did it out of respect, because although those names are of people who were alive, they also have one thing in common. Someone can guess what it is. Everyone turned around, and Jarahila said, "They are all the last 3 teams 7, but what I don't understand is where they came from. When he was here last time, he only had the 2 of us." Naruto smiled and said, "A brother's little girl got her pregnant before he left, and due to Kiruba's influence, she was able to keep them safe." Shizune asked, "What do you mean by Naruto? Are you really his twin sister?" Naruto said, "Well, a secret that my brother has is that anyone who receives bodily fluids like blood, or who knows that he has his special abilities to heal from any wound. And it also restores the body after the damage, so after she gave birth in a week, she not only had her body, she was back to how when she and Naruto met for the first time, but she also mends any minor wounds. She lost all the fat from pregnancy. I'm glad I had it too when I have kids." And to answer your question, Shizune-kun, I am his twin sister, now that I wanted to say what we were related to and how Erosanin relates to me. Shizune looked around and said, I'm Naruto's mom, so I guess I'm your mom too. Hariyama is your grandfather. Naruto glided into the sky. No. Oh. Kakashi took a step forward and asked who is coming that Naruto was not expecting. Naruto said, oh, those would be the new kids. He missed the last 2 jobs, so he wanted to make sure he was here for this one. Tsunade felt weak in the knees and asked exactly how many children she is expecting this time. Naruto said only 2 this time. Sakura said, it's impossible to have so many multiple births like that. Naruto smiled and said, spring countries are not the only fertile thing here. Personally, I think the fox had something to do with it, but who knows? It could be that karma will pay him. Shizune asked what it was that Ibiki mentioned earlier. Naruto shuddered and looked towards the deck and said, it's when an assassin thought I was Naruto and tried to kill me. Or they did, depending on how you look at it. I need to go see Yuna Yarasi, Ibiki-san, could you mind to inform them? Ibiki nodded, and they parted for her to pass. After she left, everyone turned to Ibiki, who sighed and said, it started. Flashback scene. 7-year-old Naruto was in the Sarutobi compound, where he had lived secretly for the past 7 years. They told him the truth about his brother and saw each other when they could. Naruto had promised to come to see her today, but it was now 8:30 p.m., and he hadn't, so she ran away and crossed the village to get to Naruto's apartment. He had a key, and he went in and was looking for the light switch to turn the light on when someone grabbed it by the arm, and then he felt a huge pain in his chest and saw a wedge sticking out right next to his heart. She fell, but luckily she turned back enough for the crib and didn't go in anymore. The last thing he saw was Naruto walking across the room before he passed out. End of the flashback. Naruto, when he saw his sister on the ground after returning from a mission, Abnu knocked out both boys quickly. Then he began to help her as best he could, but she would die soon. They missed his heart, but they were close enough for him to do it. It doesn't matter? Sakura then asked how he lived. And Vicky said that Yubi told Naruto a way to save her, by giving her blood directly to the wound, and pumping some of his chakra to her. He healed the wound enough to keep her alive, but the mental damage was too much for her. She was trapped in her mind, in shock, and her body. It took his body 6 years to fully recover due to the difficulty of healing an important organ like the heart. Along with the weapon's poison, Naruto used a forbidden kinjutsu and put her mind inside the seal while her body recovered. And he didn't ask why he did that. And Vicky said so that she could still experience the world instead of the darkness of the coma that her body was in. He blamed himself for not keeping his promise to be on time, so he promised never to break a promise. Every time you saw Naruto use his, it was a sexy jutsu when he was giving Naruto control of his body. It was a way to give him a little freedom to live. Kinjutsu kept his mind anchored in his body so that his mental image changed with his body and he aged as well. If you realize that, that's when he stopped using jutsu. After she returned to his body, he used an eng to walk around the city until he got married and sent her here for protection. Tsunade asked what happened to the 2 men and Vicky. And Vicky turned pale and asked, do you really want to know? Tsunade said yes. And Vicky looked around and said, not Naruto. He knows what he did, and he asked me never to tell, but that's the only time I questioned his sanity. He made both men swallow a seed. Shizune asked, that's it. And Vicky shook her head and said, you don't understand. He made them suffer for a week straight with what he did. He used his bloodline to control the growth of the seeds and made it enter every part of their bodies, but not enough to kill them. Then he made them break the skin at every joint of their bodies. I was upset to see plants coming out of a human body, causing a finger to fall off. Before the next one, then the hands and arms. It was a slow and painful process. They passed out, it stopped, and with the plants coming out, as if they could not bleed to death. After he finally killed them, he sent both bodies back to their countries. One to Claude, and one to Iwako. With a note that said, you missed Naruto, and I went easy on them. If you send more, I will kill your entire army. Signed, the White Ghost. Kakashi fell backwards when he heard the name calling everyone's attention. Jiraiya already asked what Kakashi is. Kakashi said, the White Ghost was Naruto. I thought it was just a myth that the Abnu created to scare people. Already wondered what you mean by Kakashi. Itachi said, the White Ghost was Naruto's codename. While in the village, he had a standard black Abnu uniform, but once he left the village, he reversed it to be pure white. With his true abilities, he could kill you and be 100 meters away before the blood left your body. In the 220 missions we did together, he never had a single drop of blood touching his cape. And Vicky said the 610 missions. The missions he did after that were also the same. Never a drop of blood on him, but his enemies would be covered with blood and cuts. His true speed and skills are amazing and terrifying at the same time. Tsunade said, that's it? How the hell did he fool almost the entire village full of ninjas without them knowing? If what you're saying is true, then he's practically a god of war or something. And Vicky sighed and said, I have all the information about him that I have if you want to go over it. But I think a more private location is needed. Tsunade nodded and said, I want all of you to come too. I want us all to find out how the hell he did it. Everyone followed her to a conference room, and Shizune said, let's start with her early life and her work from there. Itachi said, it would probably be the closest to that then. I met Naruto when I was 5 years old. He had already been training with watermelon, and I was skeptical at first, but after he beat me in a fight, I knew that it was more than he showed. Kakashi said, but it was already yes Abnu CPT at that point. Itachi nodded and said, don't you think he passed it on? However, it didn't just hit me. He absolutely humiliated me. Speed, weapon accuracy, jutsu, hand speed, taijutsu, and genjutsu rated me. I attacked with everything I had, and he declared a form of combat and beat me for 20 minutes in each form. I hit him in taijutsu, and after that he broke my arms and all 4 ribs. Everyone was stunned at the revelation. Most of them saw Itachi's ability from the very beginning. Itachi said, after that, the Sandai put it in my squad below me. The only thing I learned from Naruto and the Sandaime was that if you wanted to hide something, put it in front. My squad was one of the most famous until the massacre. So far, can anyone tell me the names of the other 3 members? No, the reason is because everyone was looking at me because of the fame of a child who was at Agmu. No one suspected that he was there. We did a total of 220 successful missions. 45 B rank, 75 A rank, and 100 S rank missions without a fatality or a single injured person. And Vicky took a step forward and said, it was after the incident with Naruto that I met Naruto. For the first time without his mask. Until then I had no idea. Every day I saw him or his clone on the streets, screaming and annoying. But as Itachi said, the best way to hide something was the weather. If Naruto walked into a room before today, what would have been most of your initial reactions? Ignore the annoying correct pest. That was his mask that he hid. Nothing he does is a waste. Every action he did is planned, every move perfectly executed. Take your match with Kiva during the preliminaries. Kiva said, don't remind me. He farted in my face. And Vicky chuckled and said, actually, no, she didn't. That was a noxious drug he made for the kidnapping missions, but he couldn't get it out during the battle in the village. Or he would have raised questions. He used a subtle genjutsu to make everyone think he farted, while throwing the drug in the air. In 10 minutes, no matter what you would have slept. He could have hit you at any time, but he limited his abilities to Kujeben without solo, and even then he was easy on you. How many do you use daily? And I asked how only 5 at most would be a difference. Neji said, so, what about my party? I closed his chakra points and beat him until he attracted the Cubist chakra. And Vicky burst out laughing and said, that's funny. He used the Cubist chakra as a disguise to cover his increased speed. If he took off the gravity seals, you would have made a toast the moment the match started. Gay asked how much weight she has now. Sasuke said now or in that match with Neji. He yelled at both of them. Sasuke said, in the match with Neji, he had 65 times the normal gravity. Now he has 100 times. Ja thought for a moment and said, "Impossible, her body should have been crushed." Neji asked, "What do you mean, gay? How old was I when I was fighting?" Tsunade said Naruto's body weight has been a constant 150 pounds since he was 10 years old according to records. Doctors, which means he had 9,750 pounds of weights. Now he has 15,000. You've already wondered how good he is then. And Noichi said, "I think we will find out in the battles." Sakura thought for a moment and asked who the real Naruto is. Naruto came in and said, "That's the question, Sakura. To tell the truth, he is just a tired warrior who wants to put away his swords." Choji asked, "What do you mean?" Tenten said, "It's an old saying that means you want to leave the battlefield and live a normal life. If what everyone says is true, that's because I've never lived one before." He was forced to endure beatings as a child. Trained to kill before most are taught to read, he lived a double life that was neither his true self and all so that a village can hate him. I can't understand why he would do that. Everyone seemed to consider that, and Naruto said it's all he had, while leaving everyone to their thoughts. The next day, when the ship arrived at the docks, it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and everyone was awake at that time. And they started going down the ramp, and were surprised by the prosperity of the city. Port City where they docked. It looked like it was half the size of Konoha, and everything seemed well taken care of. Tsunade looked around and Tachi said, "If everyone would follow me to the train station, we can be at the castle in an hour. And take the group through the village and soon to the train station." No one said anything without knowing what to say. Naruto had led the two children ahead by the time they reached the shore. Shizune had gone to talk to her, but he didn't get a chance to do so because when he found her after the meeting, she was asleep with the kids. Sakura asked the Sasu, "Why didn't you come back to the village after the fights?" Sasuke said, "I had my family again, so I took my fiancé to live here. If I had returned to Konoha, it would have been nothing but breeding cattle. I didn't want that, so I chose this." Sakura looked down and said, "So I see you moved." Sasuke said, "Move over, Sakura. We were teammates and somewhat friends, but we were never more than that, no matter what you thought you wanted. You never really tried to get to know the real me. You saw my name, money and fan club. So he screwed up. A friendship to try to impress me. I wasn't looking for someone to change to be with me. He wanted someone to be himself." As he walked in front of her, and she sighed. Itachi shook his head, and walked up to Sakura and said, "You know you should really try to see it from his point of view." Sakura looked at Itachi, and asked him what point of view that was. Itachi smiled and said simple, "What would you do if no one wanted you for you? Instead, they wanted you for what they could get." As he walked away from her, Sakura stopped and said, "I wasn't like that." And he didn't just burst out laughing and say, "Yes, you were. We both were." While she was sitting next to Sakura, he already looked at Hinata and asked her, "Tell me, how much have you been hiding? I see you haven't stuttered once since the truth came out, and you seem calm." And Mata smiled and said, "If you are wondering if I am stronger, then you think I am right. That was all an act to be able to get out of the complex and be able to spy on Naruto-sama. It was already said, I see." While looking the other way, Anab asked, "So, who is really stronger? Did your father have it?" Itachi, who overheard this, said to Hinata, "No offense to Yashi, but Hinata is probably the only one, next to Hiraya or me, who can outlast Naruto for any amount of time if he gets serious, and that's just because of experience and skills." Yashi nods, and Inabi looks at her sister with something of respect. As the train moved, everyone could see how beautiful the country was, and Gaara tensed up and looked around the cabin and asked, "Did anyone else feel that?" Everyone looked at him dubiously, and Tsunade asked what. Gaara said, "I'm not sure. It felt like Naruto when he was drawing the Kyuubi chakra for a moment, but then it disappeared." Tsunade frowned, and everyone looked at each other. Finally they reached the castle to which the train was going less than a quarter of a mile, and when they got closer, they saw several people running. Jiraiya jumped in front of the group and grabbed a guard and asked what's wrong. The guard said, "Mr. Jiraiya, sorry for worrying your group. We weren't expecting him for another hour. Naruto-sama asked us to do battle drills, in case anyone decided to run towards the castle during the battle, sir. If your group would wait about 15 minutes, we would be happy to accompany you, but please refrain from participating in the drill. Oh, here comes the third wave. Jiraiya turned around and saw a combination of Iwa and Kumo ninjas with a red sash on their arms, running towards the bridge that connected to the castle. Jiraiya shouted everyone out of the way and let them pass their battle exercises. As he jumped to the side, while several Noewa jumped on the group from Konoha. All the people of Konoha moved to the side and watched as the men came out of the forest, throwing gaffs and doing jutsu to make land bridges that would allow them to cross. As the battle heated up, they saw several of the defending troops being hit by pressure points, and many of the attacking groups were extinguished, and everyone was looking at the attack patterns and plans and surprised by. We've thought about it. That they were? Finally, an alarm went off, and all the Kumo Iwa ninjas turned on, and a swirl of leaves appeared on the bridge, and Naruto appeared and said, "Captains, front and center." 10 men came running and said, "Yes, sir." Naruto walked in front of them and said, "All right, I'm proud that the initial defenders successfully stopped the first wave, while alerting the castle of the attack, as well as starting the preparation to move the picks. Captions 1 to 3, good job." 3 men said, "Thank you, Lord." The ability of squadrons to get information from 1 to 3 squadron, replacing their wounded men, taking the wounded to a defensible place for medical attention, as well as protecting doctors, while the squadrons 1 to 3 strengthened the main entrance. However, they also had a problem. The medical supplies were in the wrong area, and his men who had to run and get them cost time, resulting in loss of life. Most of all, I want you to tell your men that they have improved a lot since the last time I was here, and I am proud that they protect my family, taking the wounded to a defensible place to receive medical attention, as well as protecting doctors. While squadrons 1 to 3 strengthened the main entrance, was excellent. However, it also had a problem. The medical supplies were in the wrong area, and his men who had to run and get them cost time, resulting in loss of life. Most of all, I want you to tell your men that they have improved a lot since the last time I was here, and I am proud that they protect my family. Take the wounded to a defensible place to receive medical attention, as well as protect doctors, while squadrons 1 to 3 strengthened the main entrance was excellent. However, it also had a problem. The medical supplies were in the wrong area, and his men who had to run and get them cost time, resulting in loss of life. Most of all, I want you to tell your men that they have improved a lot since the last time I was here, and I am proud that they protect my family. Naruto stopped and looked at the last 3 captions and said, "All right, caption 7. Please tell me exactly what is the main objective of your squad." The captain said, "To secure the emergency exit of our troops and the royal family." Naruto nods and says, "And where were half of your troops during this battle?" The captain said, "At your work, sir." Naruto nods and asks, "And where were you?" The captain looked confused and said, "What do you mean, sir?" Naruto looked at him with a withering look and said, "What I mean, when your men were doing their job, where are you?" "While I was unleashing something from here." The captain was sweating and out of breath, and the captain of Squadron 8 said, "Sir, it was my." Naruto hit him with a silencing jutsu and said, "Silence. Quiet, captain. I know you want to protect your brother by taking the blame for his mistake, but don't do it. He needs to listen to it himself, and his men have the right to know what their leader was doing during this exercise." The captain of the 7th Squadron said, "I was." Naruto sighed and said, "You were with your wife in the broom closet, having sex while you should have been at your post, securing the escape route with your men. I know you are an honorable man, but think about this. If you did it during a real battle, and your men had been killed, and you decided to protect your wife towards being that she escaped where everyone thinks is the escape route, but everyone was dead, which would probably happen to your wife." The man looked down and said, "I'm sorry, sir. I thought since this was all a drill, it would be fine." Naruto sighed and said, Yes, I understand that, but you put your men, the men of the other squads, and your own family at risk by doing that. Your actions, if this were real, could have been the death of everyone here. We each have our part to do, and we each have to support each other. If we don't, then all is lost. Now I could give him a punishment for this, but I'm going to do this instead. 7th Squadron. You heard what your captain did. If you do not see anything wrong by his action, then he is free from any punishment. If you feel that it is wrong and should be punished, everyone decides their punishment. Until you are willing to follow his orders again and have him as your captain. I want the vice captain to replace him as his squad leader, and his captain will become the vice captain until he has earned his trust. The captain of the 7th Squadron bowed his head and stepped back towards where his men were, and another man came forward. Naruto looked at him and said, "Now Squad 7, everyone made it perfect. Even when the enemy discovered the escape route, he was not only able to protect it, but also eliminated the threat, and notified the squad of his progress. Good job. 8th Squadron, you were able to secure the Queen and her family, as well as all the important documents, as well as provide backup for 7th Squadron when they needed it. I'm proud of your squad. Squad 9, your squad performed its duties perfectly to secure everyone, all civilians, and escort them to safe areas, as well as set traps for any enemy. For this, thank you. Now everyone has heard what they did well and did not. I want every captain to talk to their squads and try to find ways to improve even more. Aegean, thank you for everything together with my family." Fired. Everyone greeted Naruto and walked back to the castle, and Naruto turned to see everyone from Kono to Gopping. And Naruto said, "I'm sorry about that. The boat made better time than I thought it would be for you to arrive early. Please, follow me inside." Tsunade said, "Wait, Naruto, what exactly was that?" In 3 hours, a courier's hawks that are launched by the first 3 squadrons can reach the actual hidden village that is an hour away, and have them send help. That means that before the castle fell, the enemy would have a counterattack that would hit him and force him to retreat, or face the biggest threat that would allow the evacuation of all civilians and wounded from the castle. Tsunade nods and Shikamaru says, "Actually, that's a pretty good plan, as long as no one delays the village ninja somehow." Naruto waved his hand and said, "It's not possible," when he suddenly jumped high in the air, and everyone looked at him and gasped as they saw him walking in the sky. Naruto took out a kunai and dropped it, and gasped when they heard the sound of the kunai hitting something solid. Naruto grabbed him and jumped up and said, "Ouch. 10 of those clear ice bridges from here to the village, all taller than Kyubi. The village ninjas can go through it and attack them from above, and they don't have to worry about crossing the actual terrain. That would slow the enemies down, and since the ice is clear unless you really know where they are and have the seal to allow you to touch it, you could try to land on it all day, and if you did, it would kill you without the seal of protection." The neat little trick that Itachi Zabuza picked up in the fog, and using the base of the Aku bloodline on a seal in the village, makes it a perfect aid for a quick trip. Now let's go inside. I want to see if my children are still awake. While I was starting to open the way, Shizune said, "Yes, I can't wait to meet my 13 grandchildren." Naruto stopped and looked back and asked 13, "What are you talking about?" Sasuke laughed, as well as Itachi, and Naruto glared at the two, who quickly fell silent, and Tsunade said, "Your sister told us that you had the 2 who were on the boat, 9 more, and the 2 who were born last night." Naruto hit his head and said, "Guys, listen everyone, my little sister made a joke to you. I only have 6 children. 3 boys and 3 girls. She told you she had 9 of them, all right, didn't she? In fact, the names were of all the members of Team 7. Sakura said yes. Why?" Naruto shook his head and said that Yubi has some of the combos. Katorias who train the Arctic foxes here to be girls, and the 9 foxes who are teased to be my kids. Because of the amount of time they spend around me when I'm here, they all carry the Team 7 name. Remind me to kick my sister's ass later. When he started walking towards the castle. When they entered, Naruto led them to the launch room, and when they entered, they saw the 2 children from the boat, plus another boy and a girl, who were sitting next to a red-haired woman, whom Sasuke immediately approached and went looking towards. Ahead, they saw Yuki sitting on a chair with two newborns wrapped in her arms. Naruto came over and took one, sat down next to him, and motioned everyone to come closer. As they were doing so, Naruto said, "Let me introduce all of my real children to you. You already know Yuna and Arashi, who are playing with their pet foxes. There with Sasuke and Karen are Minato Yaku. The little girl in Yuki is Armas Shizayami, and this little man here is Inari." Shizune took a step forward and said, "Hi, I'm Shizune, and I guess you could say I'm your mother-in-law." Yuki looked at her and said, "It's nice to meet you, Shizune. Would you like to hug your granddaughter?" Shizune said, "If it's okay with you, since I would never be able to hold any of my children while growing up." While she looked sad, Yuki handed them to him, and Naruto looked up and saw Tsunade looking at the babies. Naruto said, "Hi Grandma, do you want to hug your great-grandson?" Tsunade opened her eyes and said, "No, I mean I don't want to intrude." Naruto waved his hand and said without incense, "Come and hug him, and take care of him." Tsunade walked forward, and Naruto carefully handed the baby to her, and Tsunade looked at him, and smiled a little smile. And the baby yawned, and Tsunade's heart melted for about 2 seconds when she realized that the warm feeling I felt in his chest was not his heart, but rather I was giddy. She glared at the baby and said, "You're going to be a problem, just like your father, right?" The baby gave a cute smile, and Tsunade thought, "Heaven help us all." After that, Naruto showed everyone where they would be staying, and allowed them to settle in and learn when the meals would be, and allowed them to travel around the castle. Naruto then put all the children to nap, and Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune watched them, while Naruto and Yuki went to rest. Naruto appeared a little later, and after listening to his mother and grandparents for the bad trick, as well as hearing about Sakura when he bumped into her, he finally got to meet her family. However, the peace would only last a short time, as the time for the tournament began to approach. It has been 3 days since the Konoha group arrived in the country of spring. To say they were surprised by what they saw would be an understatement. For the first time, everyone saw Naruto for who he really was, a powerful leader who cared about his people. Each of them felt shame at not seeing the truth and his treatments of his young life. Today the group was on their way to the elementary village. As they were walking, Hino said, "Naruto, I have to know something, how strong you really are." Naruto looked at her while holding Yuna's hand and holding little Aku in his arms, and told Hino, "I am strong enough to protect what is precious to me. That's all you need to know. If you want to know how many jutsu I know, I would say around the year 2000, if you want to know how much chakra I have enough chakra to fight the 3 Sanins and my father at his best at the same time. If you want to know how smart I am, I could beat Shikamaru in shogi at least half the time. Not bad for a last minute, huh?" When he turned and looked at the girl who was smiling at him walking beside him, Itachi appeared in a swirl of leaves in front of Naruto and said, "Naruto-sama, the Iwa team has arrived on the island." Naruto frowned and said, "I see where they are." Itachi said, "I have had the ambassador of your country who arrived earlier to get details about where and when to stay and fight. He is currently taking them to his preparation area near the exam field." Naruto nods and says, "It's okay, the detection seals are activated still." Itachi said, "Yes, Naruto-sama." Naruto said, "Well, if the seals are shot, I want all the militias to increase the security of their villages, and Black Ops to intercept them, and order them to return to their area to wait or improvise their battle. If they attack the spring security seals, and then hands over their bodies to the Earth Lord as well as the other lords, showing how they tried to sabotage the battle. Tell the others to inform everyone the same way, and notify the Yugas when Cloud arrives, but when he arrives, I dance to notify me personally." Itachi said, "Yes, sir." When he left, it's a swirl of leaves. Tsunade asked what all that was. Naruto said, "Simple. The area where everyone stays for the battle is set up with seals buried underground. If a prison shield similar to the one used by Orochimaru as a giant is activated, the Sandai will appear to me in that area, and slowly close until everyone inside is dead." Everyone gasped, and Shizune asked, "Is our area the same?" Naruto said yes. He had no choice about it, because it's the only way he could get the feudal lords to accept the precautions he wanted. Was if everyone was treated the same. Now let's continue our journey. We should reach the village in about 15 minutes. As they continued to walk. When they approached the village, they noticed that it was protected by 5 walls that surprised everyone. An ice wall was the outer wall, 20 feet away. There was an earthen wall, 20 feet away from that one, still heading towards the actual village. There was a wooden wall, 20 feet, after that it was a metal wall, and finally, after that, there was another wall that was a combination of all the other walls together. Naruto saw everyone's expressions and said, "Oh, the joys of seals." The funny thing about all those walls is that the seals on them are powered by solar energy and are recharged every day. And the walls repair themselves. Hirai already said who came up with this Naruto stamp. I know they were above your abilities. Naruto said, actually, it was about 10 of us who actually came up with this. I was one of them, Zabuza was one, the Sandai. Me also had part of this that I had planned for the walls of Konoha, but the council refused to leave it when he approached them. After getting the general seal for him from my father's notes. I must say that counting them, that made 4 of us, and Tachi has some knowledge with skills to make 5. The other 5 were people who came here, and I refuse to talk about that. For his privacy, Jiraiya nods and says, well, I'm impressed by what I see. 5 walls protecting the village. Each wall has to be broken differently, and the last wall would be almost impossible that. For a small group to break the meaning, if you eliminate the enemy before they got there or weakened them, then their last wall would stop them. Naruto said it right. Well, everyone, welcome to the elemental village. Everyone here knows everyone else, so they'll know you're not from the village when they see you. You can walk around and enjoy, but if someone asks you to stay away from something or not to approach something, pay attention to their warning. Because chances are there are traps to kill anyone who is not supposed to be here. Thank you. When he took his 2 children and started walking towards a set of houses to the east, Tsunade asked, where are you going, Naruto? Naruto said, look at those houses later. It is an indoor park where all the children go to play with each other. I was taking Yuna here to see her friends and relax with my other son. You don't need a tour guide here since the whole village would be willing to help you and take care of you. As he turned around and continued to walk away. After he left, Tsunade said, you heard him, but I want everyone to meet at the indoor park in 4 hours. So we can discuss what we see. When he saw a hot spring and headed towards it. Surprisingly, Hirai no longer passed by the hot spring, but went to look at the walls again. When everyone separated, Kakashi, who had been quite calm since he heard the title that Naruto had when he was in Ambu, decided to talk with Naruto. When he found Naruto, he was sitting on a blanket under a tree with his little sleeping baby, and saw his daughter playing with other children. Kakashi approached Naruto and asked, can I sit down? Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, as long as you don't wake the little one, I don't care. Kakashi nods and asks her, are you really the white ghost? Naruto said, what if I am? Kakashi said, look Naruto, I want. Naruto raised his hand and said, do you know why I was put on your team in the first place, Kakashi? Kakashi said no. Naruto said, because for a man dating look under you fail more times than most when it comes to personal relationships. Did you know that we did an Ambu mission together and you never knew? Kakashi blinked and asked seriously, when? Naruto said, remember about 8 years ago when Iwa placed an outpost on the border of the Land of Fire and Iwa hid it as a village? Kakashi said Bentaka well. Naruto nods and says, yes, remember the 2 extra men who were assigned to your team who supposedly died on that mission? Kakashi nods and Naruto says we don't die. Open Uchiha and I were the 2 that were assigned. We used your mission as a cover to enter the village, and while your squad went and attacked the village getting your attention, I assassinated the Kumo ambassador who was there at the time to discuss a war pact. Then I had him open outside and light up Kumo disguised as an ambassador, and he was the one who stole Kumo's forbidden scroll. Kakashi then said, why are you faking your deaths? Naruto said there is no paper trail. Dead men don't tell any stories. When you came back, and told the Sandame that presumably we were dead. He marked us as Black Ops, and so no one knew about us. As you know, the Black Ops are not put on the memorial stone for 3 years, and by then, you had already forgotten about it. The perfect way to survive under the watchful eye of the people. Kakashi frowned and said, "So my team was expendable in that mission?" Naruto said, "No, your job was to attack the village, and make it look like Kumo was responsible for your Chidori attack. Making it look like it was them. That prevented them from agreeing to another meeting for at least 2 years." Kakashi sighed and said, "I'm not used to seeing this side of you, Naruto." Naruto waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about that. After all, when this battle is over, you won't see me anymore since I'll be staying here with my family." Kakashi said, "You know the council won't like that." Naruto said, "You know the council can kiss my blonde ass well." While looking at Kakashi with an expressionless look. Kakashi really tried to keep it inside, but he had to laugh at that. Only Naruto had the balls to say that. Just at that moment, the baby woke up crying with the sound of Kakashi laughing, and Naruto glared at Kakashi and said, "I told you not to wake the baby," when his fist hit Kakashi and sent him flying across the field and into a tree passed out. Naruto picked up the baby and said, "There's a little one there, the big bad perverts are gone." While rocking the baby. When Tsunade and the others arrived, they saw Kakashi writhing tied to a tree by vines, and he had makeup all over his face, and bows in his hair. For most, the thought of finally seeing Kakashi's face would have been good, but the condition he was in now was too much to bear. They all burst out laughing. Yuna, who was lying next to her little brother and her father on the blanket, looked up when the baby started crying again, and asked, "Does that mean I can play a makeover with them too, Dad?" While giving Naruto the little slutty eye even more. Powerful? Naruto broke up in seconds and said, "Go ahead." Yuna smiled and slammed her hands on the ground, and screams were heard when the vines caught all the Konoha visitors by surprise. And she came up with a scroll and bit her thumb, and passed it through the scroll, and came out with tons of makeup and bows, and said, "Who has the first date?" Everyone turned pale at the evil smile on his face. Another week flew by in the elementary village. Naruto, as promised, allowed the Konoha group to travel around the village, and they all found things they liked. From the village, Naruto had been spending time with his wife and children, as well as talking to some other people about things that concerned the upcoming battle. Dustin had completed the legendary Raijin and the Kakashi Chakra Fang. Tsunade had given the Raijin to Naruto, and Kakashi kept it. His father's sword. Father Sakura's sword had also been completed, and she now had it, and was often seen fighting with Zabuza, Itachi or Kakashi. Speaking of Itachi, he and Sakura have been spending a lot of time together lately. Sakura finally talked to Sasuke and her fiancée Karen, and Sakura. He gave them his blessings after making many losses in the soul. When she gave them her blessing and left, Itachi came to her for comfort, and was quite inseparable. Flashback scene, Sakura said, "And I want you to know, Sasuke, I'm sorry it took so long to grow up, and I'm glad to see that you found someone who makes you happy. I hope we can be friends after all." "This one?" Sasuke said. "I would like that, Sakura." Sakura smiled, and walked out of the house where Sasuke lived, and as she walked away, a voice said, "It seemed to be a good time for closure, huh?" Sakura looked up and saw Itachi, and said yes. Itachi said then, "What are you planning to do now?" As I walked by his side, Sakura said, "I don't know. I've been chasing Sasuke for so long, I feel lost." Itachi said, "Maybe you just need a guide until you find your way." While looking at the sky, Sakura looked at him and asked, "That's corny. How could someone guide me when even I don't know my?" Sakura was silenced by a kiss on Itachi's lips, and when he walked away, she said, "Maybe you'll follow my path." Sakura looked at him frozen instead, and Itachi saw that he was surprised. And he put his arm around him and said, "Let's go eat. I'm hungry." When he started to drag her away. As a flashback, Kakashi and Rin have been spending time together. And Rin explained how he bumped into Naruto while he was on his training trip with Jiraiya. Tsunade and Hirai had already spent time with my grandchildren, and Shizune had also spent time with them and their daughter and son. And so, Neji and Nata and Inabi had a sparring match and, to the surprise of the other three, and Nata handed them all her butts. Flashback scene. Yasi, Neji and Inabi, all three were on the floor, panting, with Inata standing in the middle of the three, and said, "I still think I'm a weak Neji." Neji swallowed, and shook his head, and Yasi asked what that attack was. Inata said, "Oh, something that occurred to me while I was dancing in the water." With a smile on his face. End of flashback. Both generations of the groups, and not Bara Shika Baracho, have been talking and training. As for the others, most of them were looking around and enjoying the time in the village. Now we meet everyone on the eve of the battle. Naruto sighed as he stood in front of the group now, and said, "It's okay everyone, I've put it off long enough. I have received news that Danzo and his men are here on the island now. He has 25 men, plus another 25, as his own personal escort. Rain and Kumo have also arrived, so it looks like it will just be the 4 teams instead of the others. Apparently, the other superpower has decided not to get involved. I asked everyone before I thought about it, and now I need an answer because the battle starts tomorrow. Which one of you will be willing to fight on my side? I have Itachi, Sasuke, Zabuza, Aku and myself. I can have up to 20 more." Tsunade took a step forward and said, "I'm in." Hiraya said, "Me too." Sakura said, "It won't be a great team 7, but I fight too." Naruto said, "I'm fighting." Naruto said, "No, you're not Naruto, you can fight, but I need you to protect Yuki and the kids for me. I don't trust Danzo." Kakashi said, "Team 7 joined again, so I'm in." Naruto said, "Well, that's 9. Gaara said, "My brother and I are inside." Naruto said, "Thank you, Gahara, that takes us up to 12. And Nata said, "I am with you, Okage-sama." Yashi said, "And Nata, I'd like to join myself, but I think I'll stay in the spectators' seats and watch Danzo for you, Naruto." Naruto said, "I thank you for that, Yashi." Gei said, "My flames of youth burn brightly, and I will follow your orders." Gei-sensei told him, "I'll do it too." Gei told La. Gei-sensei told him. Gei told La. Gei-sensei told him. Naruto banged his 2 heads together and finally said, while everyone was looking at him, and Naruto said, "So, how many does that lead to?" Neji said, "He told me 16 ago." Naruto nods and says, "Then, anyone else?" Tenten said, "If my teammates are in it, so am I." Naruto nods, and Enko says, "I'm in Gaki." And Vicky said, "I'd like to, but I'm not in as good shape as I once was." He was sitting behind the desk and the torture cells. "I will also help Yasi to be on the lookout for any suspicions." Naruto said, "Well, that's 18. Sume said, "The 3 stray dogs are with you, Naruto." Naruto said, "So, that makes 21 correct." Shikaku said, "Inoshikacho's original team will help you and our children if Danzo tries anything during the battle." Naruto said, "All right, anyone else?" Shibi said, "I will be your last member, Naruto. Sama. My son will help the other heirs along with Ibiki, and thus keep an eye on Danzo and his men. You can mark them with a female in case Danzo tries to break the rules." Naruto nods and says, "I thank you all, and I want you to know that I am grateful for all the help, and I hope that let's all get out of this battle alive. In order to do this, we need a plan, because we have 75 other people who will try to kill us, so any ideas?" Shikamaru got into his thinking pose, getting everyone's attention, and said, "Well, and so the planning for the next one began. Day of battle. The next day, the sun had just risen, and we found 99 people standing on the ground, prepared for combat, in front of a wall. Where on the top of the wall was a spectator box that was filled with various feudal lords, Princess Yuki along with Naruto, and 10 guards around her. On the right side of the stands was Danzo, along with several men dressed in Chunin and Jounin costumes. The fire chief stood up, and before he could say anything, a yellow flash appeared on the ground in front of the 99 people. And a man with a white cape, solid white, and a blank white ambo mask with no eye holes appeared in front of everyone. The person bowed and said, "Forgive my lord for being late. It seems that another party wishes to intervene in these matches." The fire chief looked at the ambo and asked, "Who are you and who is this other part?" The Ambo took off his mask and said, "I am Naruto Namikaze, code name of White Ghost, and remove Rokuda and Miokai from Konoha, sir. As for the other party that has requested to enter the battle, sir, it would seem to be a group formed by missing ninjas, being led by who appears to be Orochimaru." At the name of the leader, several people shuddered, and the fire chief said, "But Orochimaru is dead." Laughter could be heard getting everyone's attention, and Naruto put on his mask and covered his head with the cape. As he walked towards Konoha's group, everyone looked where the laughter could be heard, and to everyone's surprise, Orochimaru said, "It's so nice to see you again, Naruto-kun. I finally took over my former subordinate body Kabuto, and now I live again. I heard about this little tournament, and decided to bring mine to this battle too. By rude, you have to recognize me as a group of potential investors, feudal lords, because if you didn't, my men would be glad to start a new village in your countries, as I did in Rice Country. In fact, that's what I plan to do with Konoha after winning this battle. Think about all those test subjects." Kukakukak. Sasuke clenched his fist as Naruto walked beside him and said, "I should have killed the bastard when I had the chance." Naruto said, "Take it easy. The bastard gave me the opportunity to scare everyone with the Gazen and my code name. I've got the whole island on high alert now, so look at you." Sasuke nods, and the fire chief, after talking to the other leaders, said, "Very well, Orochimaru, I do not know how you are alive. But you can also enter. Please take your place while I explain the rules." Orochimaru approached with his men, all dressed in the fabrics of the Shinobi Sound Village, and nothing different could be seen on any of them. "While I was there," Mitsunade said, "Jiraiya, I must say that age has not been kind to any of you. I wonder if the rumors I heard about them both being the parents of the Yondaime were true, and that your great-grandkids have the Makuden abilities. If so, they may be my test subjects too." At this, several people wanted to kill the snake bastard, and Tsunade, who was being held by Jiraiya, said, "I will kill you before you get close to the bastard of my family." Orochimaru chuckled and said, "We'll see, Tsunade. You can use anything and everything at your disposal, but you will not be allowed to leave the battlefield that is covered by these walls. There are cameras all over the battlefield that allow us to see what is happening. That's all. You can go." Only then everyone had gone away blurry. Danzo said, "Oh my god, that was a big surprise. And so I was close to him with Ibiki," he said. "Yes, it was like that." Ibiki then asked, "How does it feel to know that you are responsible for our situation, Danzo?" Danzo said, "I like it. I'm finally going to get everything I wanted." "Everything?" While looking at Princess Yuki. And Vicky looked at Yashi, who activated her bloodline, following as many people as she could before turning it off when they separated. While Orochimaru was heading towards the area, his spies informed him that he was thinking about what happened several days before. Flashback scene. Orochimaru was now in front of a group of Dead Rod members and said, "Tell me, Danzo, why have you appeared at this moment?" Danzo came out of the shadows and said, "I have a proposal for you that I think we would both find beneficial." Orochimaru asked, "And what is that?" as he held out the sword to the Clipper. Danzo said how he would like to get revenge on the brat Kyugi, Konoha, and his former teammates. Orochimaru said, "Interesting, and how would you organize this?" Danzo took out a scroll and threw it to Orochimaru, who caught it, opened it and began to read. As he was reading, his eyes flashed with anger, and he said, "I see, then I will agree." Danzo said, "Well." Orochimaru said, "Oh yes, I forgot." When he disappeared and reappeared in front of Danzo, he stabbed a grass cutter and told him, "You will be the first to die in my revenge. From rude, you will still serve a purpose for me." While killing several members of Rote, he injured others. Orochimaru then started sighing and hit his hands on the ground when a coffin was lifted off the ground. And the cover came out of the coffin and Danzo came out. Orochimaru said, "Yes, you will serve me well since I already knew all this and more." Kyukaku. While planting a crib and on the back of Danzo's head, Danzo knelt down and asked, "What are your orders, Orochimaru-sama?" Orochimaru. He smiled. End of flashback. Orochimaru thought soon I will have everything I want, including the perfect body and my revenge. Naruto and the rest of his team arrived at the place where they decided to act as his staging area, and he looked around and asked anyone. Itachi, Sasuke, Neji, and Jimata activated their bloodlines and said, "No, where is clear?" Naruto nods and says, "Who the hell was that back there?" Attracting everyone's attention. Sakura asked, "What do you mean by Naruto?" "That was Orochimaru." Naruto said, "No, it wasn't. His smell was wrong, either Orochimaru or Kabuto. It's like he's wearing Orochimaru's face, like Orochimaru made it rain again in Sakura's Chunin exams." Sasuke said, "I agree, the chakra level was too low for Orochimaru. Whoever it was wasn't Orochimaru." Tsunade then asked, "What are you saying?" Naruto said, "I'm saying that the fact that someone is imitating Orochimaru means that the real one is somewhere nearby, or that we have someone else pulling the strings." Shibi said, "I have placed mistakes in the team, and there is something strange about them. My mistakes don't like their chakra." Naruto frowned and Jiraiya said, "So, what should we do about it?" Naruto said, "We continue as planned. I want everyone to avoid Orochimaru's army for now. We took care of the equipment as planned, and then reformed to work in Orochimaru. Tsunade, you take your team to deal with the Kumo. Jiraiya, you take your team to deal with Iwa. I'll take my team to deal with Danzo men. Remember, no one plays hero. I don't want to add anyone else to the memorial stone before I retire. That's an order." Everyone smiled and said, "Yes, sir." Naruto smiled and said, "Well, then how much time do we have now?" Itachi said 25 minutes. Naruto nods and took out a scroll and opened it, and out came a roll of triplicate kunyas. And Naruto said, "All right, everybody, take a crib, and if you run into something you can't handle, throw it away. Then just wait. I will be there to help as soon as possible." Everyone looked at him and took one. Neji stepped forward and said, "Naruto, I have to ask something. When we fought in the exams and you said that you would change the Hyuga clan, what did you mean?" Naruto smiled and said, "Would you mind?" And Nada said Naruto at all. He was referring to this. When she turned around and pulled her hair up from her neck. Everyone gasped, and Neji asked, "What is that?" And Mata let his hair down and said, "It's a new stamp that I want to put on the whole clan. Protect the bloodline without subjugating half of them." It was a commitment he was asking Naruto to put into practice if he ever had to reveal his true position. "It was the cost to me to be his spy." Naruto said, "My father originally designed it and I modified it later. The only drawback is that you can't transplant an eye like Kakashi." While frowning, Neji said, "I see. Thank you, Naruto-sama." Naruto said, "Don't do it, Neji. I'm just Naruto. I hate paperwork, especially those I consider friends." Neji feels, and Naruto sighs and says, "Okay everyone, split up into your teams, watch your backs and let's kick ass." At that moment an explosion was heard in the distance, and Naruto said, "That's the signal." Naruto, Hitachi, Hinata, Sasuke, Jiraiya, and Tsunade started waving, and said together that Uchino sei no jutsu. As the whole area was covered with smoke. When the smoke cleared, Kyuubi, Gambunta, Katsuya, Mamba, the new snake boss, and Lancer, Lot, the chief of the Falcon, and Atlas, the chief of the Raven. Each of the bosses looked at each other, and Naruto said, "All right, Shibi, in what way are our goals?" Shibi said, "Kumo's team is to the north. Danzo's team is to the west. Iwa is south of us, and the Rain Ninjas are." "That's strange." Naruto asked what. Shibi said Danzo, Orochimaru and the Rain Ninjas are in the west now, but they seem to be waiting. Naruto frowned and said, "Jiraiya and Tsunade, proceed as planned. Kyuubi, head west of Itachi Nada, do. Let the call take flight and look for an easy prey." Itachi said, "You heard it, Atlas, proceed." And Nada said, "Belen sell it." Jiraiya said, "Come on Gambunta, it's time to rock and roll." Gambunta took out his pipe and blew smoke at Kyuubi and said, "I still don't like you." While jumping, after Jiraiya and Gambunta there was Anko, the Hino group, Shika, Cho along with Neji, Kakasiriana. Tsunade said Katsuya, follow Mamba. Sasuke said Mamba, I want you to fit a tunnel to the north big enough to allow Katsuya to follow it. When you come to the surface, anyone with a headband as his lunch. Mamba shook her tail and dived on the ground, and Katsuya followed her. Tsunade jumped into the hole, followed by Sakura, Hinata, Sasuke, Kiba, Tamari, Kankuro, Gaara, and Shibi. Naruto sighed and said, "Very well everyone, let's follow Kyuubi." Behind Naruto were Tenten, La, Gei, Zabuza, Aku, Sum and Tachi. Meanwhile, in the spectator box, Danzo looked around and said, "Tell me Yashi, why are you really here? I mean, surely you could be more useful on the battlefield instead of up here. And Vicky, I can understand, but you're not here for whatever reason there might be." And so he said, "I'm here because I don't think this should happen here and now." Danzo didn't say anything as he looked at the monitors on the ceiling, watching the scene, and thought that almost time. As Jiraiya clung to Gambunta, she soon saw the Iwanans, but something was wrong. It wasn't until Gambunta jumped into the air again that Jiraiya realized exactly what was wrong. He said, "Meanwhile, with Tsunade, Mamba had just exploded on the floor, where he detected Kumo's ninjas, and Katsuya came out a few moments later. Tsunade saw that the Kumo ninjas gathered when Mamba ordered them to eat when she saw something that scared her. She said, 'It's not good.' On the other side of the field, Kyuubi howled in the air as he smelled the group's aroma to the ninja. The one he was heading to, and he thought, yes, finally a chance to get fed again. Naruto, who was behind him, saw Kirubi stop for some reason, and Naruto ran to Kirubi's leg and jumped on his head. And looked and thought, God no. In 3 different places around the arena, smoke suddenly came out of the area. When the smoke cleared where Jiraiya was, almost Miliguanins rose up. With Tsunade, there were about 400 ninja like everyone watching her. With Naruto, as the smoke cleared, Naruto turned pale because there, standing on the remains of a circle of the summoning, there were about 400 nins of sound, about 400 nins of rain, and 200 members of the root. And Orochimaru Ev. Pai there said, "You lost the brat Kyuubi." When he got close to his face and pushed it away, Naruto opened his eyes and saw Danzo. Naruto at that moment felt his twin sister chakra burst and thought, no, my family. Naruto felt cold when he saw Danzo standing there and finally understood what happened. Naruto saw the enemy ninja attacking him and closed his eyes and thought, God, please, whatever happens here today, protect my family and friends. When a tear fell from his eye, when he opened them and said Kyuubi, lunch. Naruto then clasped his hands together and said Taju Kagebansen no Jutsu. When 1,000 Kagebansen appeared, each one took out a copy of the Raijin and charged at the next ninjas. Naruto turned around and ran towards the people. People were following him, and when he approached, he shouted back up, "It's a trap." When he passed by the group, everyone stopped and turned and started following him. Itachi asked what happened. Naruto looked over his shoulder and said, "It's a trap, Danzo is here and Orochimaru is back in the stands." The reason why so many ninjas gathered was to make a summoning circle. They summoned about 1,000 sound, rain and root ninjas. "We should regroup, and Tachi, look for your summoning, and find Tsunade, and have them return to our initial location." Naruto then bit his thumb, and ran through his hands, and slammed them on the ground, summoning Gamatachi. Appeared and Naruto said, "Gamatachi, there is no time to explain. I need you to get the pervert and tell him to fall. It's a trap. Go back to where we started. Orochimaru, Danzo and Rain have teamed up." The toad looked at Naruto and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Itachi jumped onto the back of the raven he summoned and flew into the air in the direction of where he saw Katsuya. And even with his Sharingan at a distance, he was able to instantly realize what was happening there. Making a decision, Itachi said, "Atlas, head to the elemental village now." The raven turned in the direction and started flying towards where the elemental village was. Naruto, who was running with the rest of the group, saw Atlas turn and fly in the other direction and frowned even more. Itsu said to me, "Naruto, I can smell them coming closer." Naruto said, "I know. My Kagebansen has already been destroyed and Kyuubi is almost without chakra." Zabuza asked, "What should we do, Gaki?" Naruto looked at him and said, "It's time for zero visibility, Zabuza. Do it." Zabuza smiled and said, "Come on, Aku, let's go." As he changed direction and walked away from the group. Sum asked what Naruto is doing. Naruto said, "I have home advantage here. We have to hurry up." While changing direction away from where Zabuza was. Back with Jiraiya, He was standing on top of Gambuntada, after having turned on the toad oil combo when Gamatachi appeared. Gamatachi said, "Hey, brother said to tell you to back off. It's a trap. Orochimaru, Danzo and Rain have teamed up." Hiraya said, "It's worse than that. Looks like Iwa has joined in as well." As he grabbed the toad and jumped off Gambunta's head just before it turned to smoke, Jiraiya saw his team approaching and ran towards them. And as he passed by them, he shouted retreat. Everyone was surprised when Jiraiya said that and looked where he was coming from as he saw rocks sailing in the air heading towards them. They and everyone turned and backed away. Tsunade, seeing the Kumonins appear, said Katsuya, "When I enter the tunnel, destroy it, and try to get some of them out if you can." While jumping off the slug boss head, just as Sakura was coming out of the tunnel, Tsunade jumped into the tunnel and shouted, "Go back now." Sakura was wide-eyed when she saw the ninjas and followed Tsunade back to the tunnel just before Katsuya crushed him, and started spitting acid at Kumo's ninjas while Manda tried to eat as much as she could. Back in the waiting box, an explosion of Inumo surprised everyone, and when the Konoha ninjas and the Queen's guards got ready to fight the smoke, they cleared and there were the 25 root ninjas were, now. There were 25 sound ninjas and Orochimaru was where Danzo was before. Orochimaru chuckled. And he said, "Now bring me the Queen alive and kill the rest." His men charged. Naruto got into a fighting position and grabbed a scroll and bit his thumb as he passed the hand signals, and wiped the blood off with the scroll and slammed them on the floor, and said Kyuchiyo-sei no jutsu. Foxback. And he was covered in smoke. When the smoke cleared there were the fox 36 feet tall around her, and she said, "Kill the sound ninjas." The foxes charged the sound ninjas. While this was happening, Yuki thought thank God Naruto planned this and bit his thumb and wiped the blood off with a seal on the lower arm of his chair, and suddenly the shield barrier shot up every 10 feet cutting everyone in different sections. The foxes that were charging stopped instantly, but some of the sound ninjas weren't so lucky, and came across the shield that instantly burst into flames. Orochimaru chuckled and said, My, it seems that my actions were anticipated a little. It doesn't matter, these shields won't stop me long, and then Queen, you and your children will be mine." When he started making hand signals, and after a few seconds, he hit his hand on the ground and the shield around him fell. He moved and started the process again. The feudal lords seemed scared for a moment when they were suddenly covered in smoke, stopping Orochimaru's actions as he watched where people disappeared into the smoke, and when the smoke cleared they were gone. He frowned and looked around, and saw that the queen had a scroll with which she wiped the blood, and every time she did, the people in each section disappeared. He said, "I see, each section is designed to allow you to evacuate them if necessary." Impressive. When he started working even faster. In the elemental village, Hitachi landed on his crow, and people started running towards him. A man named Murma asked, "What's the matter, Itachi-sama?" Itachi said, "Prepare the village. The exams have been compromised. Evacuate the castle and get ready to summon the big pack." Murma said, "Sir, yes, sir," while taking off to alert the rest of the ninjas in the village. Itachi frowned and began to prepare. Zabuza and Aku were running when a group of sound ninjas landed in front of them, and one of the sound ninjas said, "Well, what do we have here? It looks like she wants to be a swordsman and a little girl." Zabuza looked at Aku, who laughed, and Aku said, "Go ahead, Zabuza-sama. I'll take care of these guys." Zabuza said, "Okay, Aku, but not so. You're late a lot." When he started to leave one of the sounds, Ninja went to intercept only for Aku to appear in front of him with a knee on his stomach. When she said, "I am your enemy now." The ninja ran out of breath as his 4 companions started to attack. 2 of them began to make signs of hand, while another carried a cradle, and while the 4th drew a sword. Aqua acted like she was frozen in place when the one Cunhas had went to stab her, and she replaced herself at the last second with the one who was still out of breath. The effect was instantaneous when the woman stabbed the man in the kidney. He fell to the ground clutching his side as he began to die slowly and painfully. The The one who stabbed him didn't have time to react when Aku grabbed him by the neck and broke him from behind, only to be stabbed in the back. The sound nin smiled until he noticed that he wasn't bleeding blood but water. At that moment, Aku exploded and ice fragments shot out of her body, killing the nearest ninjas and injuring one of the two who had finished their hands looking for her. The one who was injured shouted, "Where are you?" Aku said, "Behind you." Before he had time to turn, he had a Kuna Y implant in his head. The other sound nin said, finishing his jutsu by watching Aku Sonic Scrambler no jutsu. While snapping my fingers, Aku instantly burst into water and the nin said Mizubansen. An ice mirror formed in front of him and he went to stab him with a Kune and Aku appeared in the mirror and said, "You can't touch me here." However, while she was throwing Senbon at him, hitting him in the heart, killing him, Aku stepped out of the mirror and headed towards where Zabuza was heading. Inside the tunnel, Tsunade said, "Okay, everyone listen up. I do not know what exactly happened next to the fact that Kumo seems to have summoned a good portion of ninja to attack. I can only assume that we are their targets. We need to find a way to get a big group of them out and warn the others." Gaara sat in a meditative position and extended his hand while holding the other one over his eye. Sand began to turn in his hand and took the shape of an eye. Gaara then crushed the eye and the sand took off down the tunnel. Upstairs, at the entrance where Katsuya had destroyed it, Kumo's ninjas were blowing everything up along with different jutsu, trying to clear it where they could start the chase. A nin grabbed him by the eye and said, "Dust in my eye?" as he looked around for a few seconds. Back in the tunnel, Claw got up and said, "Go, I'll take care of them," as he started walking the way they were running away. Tsunade said, "But Gaara, can you?" He felt a hand on his shoulder and saw Kankuro, who shook his head and said, "He's right. Gaara has the best chance to stop them and live, or at least stop them. We must warn others. Come on." When he started running towards where the first camp was, Tsunade frowned and started following him, but she looked back and saw Gahara, who looked serious but also bored. Hirai already crashed a Rasengan into the face of an Iwanin. Chusa was already in his expanded body, more than 60 feet tall, while Shikaku was breaking Iwanin's neck that he captured with his shadow. And Noichi smiled as 10 men confronted each other and threw explosive tags at each of their partners before killing themselves. Kakashi shouted "White Kidori" as he swung his fang, firm chakra, through to Iwanins. 4 cries of Gatsuga were heard as 4 drills drilled 30 Iwanins, only to stop long enough to reveal 4 Anna before they attacked another group. Hirai was already ducking under another attack when several snakes flew up over his head and several screams were heard. Jiraiya looked and saw a smiling Anko and nodded before stabbing an Iwanin in the neck who tried to attack from behind. Naruto was moving through the ninjas while all they saw was a yellow spot of the Raijin that was in his hands, while killing anyone who got in his way. Running parallel lines from him were Liga, and they had got rid of their weights. Tenten was sitting on top of Kyubi, who was trading tails for the ninjas while throwing weapons at anyone who approached the king of the Viju. Sum and his partner were attacking anyone who tried to climb the Kyubi to get to Tenten. Naruto thought, "Come on Abusa, hurry up," while slitting the throat of a rain ninja, while dodging to the right of a Rob member. Zabuza finally reached the Rainbow Glacier and ran to where the Exogen Crystal was powering the generator to make sprout in this country. He passed by that machine and ran to another one that had been recently installed. He raised his hand and said, "Let's have some fun," while pressing a button. The Kumonins had just crossed the entire place where they could follow the Konoha shinobi when a siren was heard in the distance. Everyone looked and saw something that looked like an avalanche heading towards them. The leader of the Kumonins shouted, "Hurry up, get into the tunnel before they bury us," while he was jumping. Everyone else got scared as the spring weather in the countryside had been a mystery. Everyone jumped as they followed their leader. Then they started running down the tunnel, and after almost 700 yards, the tunnel suddenly went dark and someone set off a flare. And everyone looked around when a cold voice said, "Welcome to their graves. The Kixen Desert." when the walls suddenly burst as the sand rushed over the men. Some men screamed and turned to run out the way they came, while others started moving towards each other in the tunnel. However, they soon discovered the horrible truth as the ground around them slowly filled with them. An area of 1,000 yards had been completely enclosed inside the cave, and it was indeed going to be their graves. Some tried to use fire, which caused the walls to collapse faster. On the other side of the inner wall that held them in, Gaara was panting, and thought who said he needs a demon to be a mass murderer. While angry screams and pleas for mercy echoed inside the cave every time. Quieter. Kakashi was panting from using so many jutsu when a warning siren sounded that drew attention of all, and saw a white mass coming towards them, and caught up with them quickly. Kakashi's eyes opened for a moment. He smiled and put a soldier pill in his mouth and said, "Hello, 8 points larynx, spine, lungs, liver, jugular, subclavian artery, kidneys, heart. Now, what will be my attack points?" The sounds of screaming echoed through the fog that now covered the area. Naruto was panting when the siren sounded, and Naruto shouted, "Kyuubi, silent murder." Kyuubi's roar echoed across the field as the fog spoke. It covered the area. Silence echoed in the countryside as a voice said, "Welcome to hell, boys and girls. I am your host, the White Ghost. Tell Shinigami that I will send him a group discount today." Naruto smiled when he took off his mask long enough to take a pill from soldier to Kamichi, and when he swallowed it, he felt his chakra returning and closed his eyes and listened around. Then, Naruto started waving and shouted, "Kyuubi now." Everyone was tense when another roar was heard, and then the white haze that was in the area was removed. And Naruto finished his signs and said, "Tajukai Kyuubi no Jutsu." While everyone was looking and saw Naruto standing on Kyuubi's head, while 20 other Kyuubis appeared. And everyone started running around the field, trampling all the ninjas they could, while screams could be heard all over the field. It lasted for about 30 minutes before all the Kyuubis had disappeared, as they had either been taken out or had run out of chakra. Bodies were lying everywhere, and Naruto was being supported by a tree with Lee and Gai sitting next to him. Tenten was on a limb above the tires too, while Tsume rubbed his teammate's fur while sweating and said, "I haven't fought so much in the year." "How many do you think survived?" Naruto said, "I guess about 300 are still around our group. I saw Inata summon disappear during the battle, so she must be out of the chakra too. Itachi has hopefully secured the village, and Yuki evacuated the pips. For now I'm worried about the other two teams." A coughing sound was heard, and everyone tensed up, and a voice said, "Relax. It's us, Gaki." Naruto looked and saw Anko supporting Kakashi, who looked ready to fall, and the others looked dead tired. Naruto asked, "Where the hell have you guys been?" Hiraya said, "Shut up, boy. I was summoned a large number of his ninjas." Another voice said, "Kumo did it too." Naruto frowned and said the same thing here. Rain, San and Rod convened a great group of people here as well. There should be over 300 of our struggle still around. When he looked around and saw that Tsunade's group looked better, but everyone was tired. Hirai already frowned and said, "I say that about 200 of our are still around. After we started killing them, they retreated." Sasuke said, "What is the Dobe plan?" Naruto looked at Shibi and asked for any information from you colonies. Shibi stayed quite a long time, and Itachi said, "He is currently in the village together with the VIP. Looks like all the ninjas I tagged are either dead or have been removed from the walls. That's all I have." Naruto nods and says, "We have to get to the village." Tsunade asked what's wrong with the castle. Naruto said no, he's been abandoned. As he slowly got up, Hiraiya frowned and asked why. Naruto said the same reason everyone thought we should go there. It is defensible, but it has a major flaw that only someone who knows the inside of the castle would know. As he started to head towards the elemental village, Sakura asked, "What is that?" Naruto stopped and said, "He is not able to keep supplies for a large group of people in a few days. while looking at them all before continuing to walk. Everyone seemed to think for a moment, and Shikaku said, "So you mean if someone were to defend him, they would starve to death if they get trapped inside?" Naruto said, "Exactly. Now let's go," while trying to get everyone moving. Several hours later, the group approached the village gates and everything. All the Kinoshinobi were surprised to see about 600 nin defending the walls, and Naruto smiled and said, "Just because the village only has a small amount of people inside the village, it doesn't mean all our strength. They are in one place." Itachi appeared and said, "How are everyone doing?" Naruto said warily, "How are our people?" Itachi said, "All the villages have been abandoned with the emergency response plan, and everyone is in the village walls. My summons has counted almost 500 enemy ninjas still here on the island, and they have taken over the castle." Naruto nods and asks what's up with the bigs. Itachi said everything's safe and sound. The queen was able to use the seal's shield to get everyone here. Orochimaru is the one behind this. Naruto nods and asks what's going on with my family. Itachi said, "They are safe in the fortified shelters, with all the other civilians." Naruto said, "Well, make sure our men are rotated so they don't get burned. Our group needs to rest and replenish. Bring the real village." Itachi said, "Yes, sir." As she disappeared in a swirl of leaves, Tsunade asked which real village. At that moment, a humming noise was heard as the ground separated, and several buildings began to rise up. And everyone saw that between the building, there were towers that could be used to attack enemies on the ground. 20 men, all dressed in white ambu suits, appeared kneeling, and Naruto said, "Welcome to the real hidden elemental village." To say that all the Konoha ninjas were surprised would be an understatement. Hirai already asked how. Naruto caught a scroll that one of the 20 white ambu threw at him, and began to take elements from it, and said, "The country of spring is not only the most fertile country in the world. It is also the most industrial as well. We have to thank Yuki's dad for that. He spent the treasury all over the country, researching ways to make it sprout here. In doing so, he discovered many other things that make the real hidden village you see before you real." As he had a feeling that something bad was going to happen, he made the village hide in the underground perch. It was so that you and anyone else who is watching the village will not consider us a threat until this whole mess is sorted out. Now report it. While Naruto was finishing putting on a new shirt and tunic, Kage sealed the last of his battle cloths on the scroll. The one who threw the scroll said, "All the preparations are complete, sir. Our entire force is ready to follow his orders, and, as we suspect, he takes over of the castle to use as a base of operations. All the civilians have moved to their second homes here in the village, and all security is ready if we are attacked, sir. We have already activated the secondary defense seals around the island." Naruto said, "Fine, have all our doctors check them and treat them, and then move them to my properties to rest. Where are my wife and children?" The man said, "They are safe and sound on their property, Your Highness." Naruto nods and says, "Oh, it's time to lick our wounds for now. Tell all the Vips that I will meet with them first thing